Chapter 1291. Along the way, under the guidance of Lin Feng and Thousand Love Emperor, Jin Ji and Shi Jixin grew up quickly. In fact, in terms of aptitude, the two of them were only slightly inferior to Thousand Love Emperor. As they both belonged to the 12 constellations of the royal path, they were able to unleash their abilities very early on. Regardless of whether it was Jin Ji or Shi Jixin, they both had their trump cards. Although they were only at the advanced saint level, they were much stronger than human experts of the same level. In a one-on-one battle, you should be able to compete with the sorcerer tribe of the same level. Lin Feng's eyes flickered as he spoke slowly. As time passed, he had a thorough understanding of the two's abilities. Jin Ji's combat ability was slightly stronger, but Shi Jixin was slightly stronger in terms of using treasures. According to his observation, Shi Jixin was also slightly stronger than Jin Ji in terms of true secret technique. However, in general, if the two of them were to fight to the death, it was still unknown who would emerge victorious. If the two of them worked together, they would be able to compete with Thousand Love Emperor. However, the chances of winning should be around 30 to 70. He did not have a deep understanding of Thousand Love Emperor's abilities. In the 3 days of adventure, Thousand Love Emperor basically did not use much of her abilities. She was merely showing off her skills, but she was still overwhelmingly powerful. These monsters are too terrifying. Shi Jixin's eyes flickered. That's right. When we met the Emperor River Sorcerer tribe previously, we were completely no match for them. Jin Ji said in distress. Jin Ji's speed was not that fast as he majored in the earth element. When he met the Emperor River Sorcerer tribe, he was indeed unable to defeat them. Otherwise, how could they be called the strongest tribe? Thousand Love Emperor said softly. At the same level, the Sorcerer tribe is definitely stronger than the Ancient tribe. They are only slightly inferior to the divine beasts and ferocious beasts that were born from the chi of heaven and earth. Of course, this is just a normal situation. It can't be generalized. For example, even the weakest human race can have a super strong warrior like Lin Feng. As she spoke, the three of them looked at Lin Feng. Jin Ji and Shi Jixin nodded solemnly. They were extremely confident in Lin Feng. What a joke! Lin Feng could defeat the King Sage Sorcerer tribe. Even though the shaman had escaped with heavy injuries in the end, Lin Feng's victory without any injuries had completely shocked the two of them. You guys aren't bad either. Lin Feng smiled and didn't explain too much. Speaking of which, he wasn't a pure human. Half of his original body was of the ancient race, and the blood of the divine beast, the phoenix, was fused with the body of a starry sky expert, and the inheritance of his master, the ancient divine beast, the thunder centipede. In terms of the true human race, Qianlian Huang was the strongest in his opinion. She was the true genius of the human race that was rarely seen in tens of thousands of years. By the way, Sister Qian, are the demons strong in a one-on-one battle? Shi Jixin asked curiously. Jin Ji's eyes lit up. He was also rather curious. Strong, but also not strong. Qianlian Huang said softly. Unlike the 12 clans of the Sorcerer tribe, whose innate talents and strength are similar, and unlike the humans, who only differentiate between men and women, the demon clan's racial system is too huge, and it has a trapezoidal structure. The strongest demon emperor bloodline is comparable to the strongest bloodline of the Sorcerer tribe, such as the Emperor River Sorcerer tribe. Even the demon king bloodline is comparable to the ordinary bloodline of the Sorcerer tribe, such as the Zhurong Sorcerer tribe and the Gonggong Sorcerer tribe. However, most of the demon clan's bloodline is not very good. More than 90% of them are inferior to the ancient race's bloodline. There are even many demon clans that find it difficult to transform. They can't even compare to us humans. Listening to Qianlian Huang's words, the group moved forward slowly. The 3-day journey wasn't easy, but it wasn't difficult either. After all, they had just entered the Sorcerer tribe. It was quite big. It's very important to familiarize yourself with the 12 sorcerer tribes, their innate abilities, attacks, and so on. Qianlian Huang tirelessly took care of Jin Ji and Shi Jixin, and did her best to teach them. It wasn't that she was afraid that they would be a burden, but that she really treated them like her younger siblings. Cold on the outside but warm on the inside, Lin Feng said softly with a faint smile. Qianlian Huang seemed arrogant, but she was actually approachable. She seemed cold and inhumane, but she was considerate of others. With her in the group, it could be said that she had taken a lot of pressure off him. Jin Ji and Shi Jixin were also very respectful to Qianlian Huang, and they listened to her patiently. It could be said that the first lesson had completely convinced them. Actually, it wasn't a bad thing for them. Oh! Lin Feng was startled as he pondered. His eyes narrowed as he looked ahead. He could vaguely feel the presence of many auras. There were at least 1,000 of them. His gaze landed on Qianlian Huang, who smiled back and nodded gently. Lin Feng suddenly asked, "Have we arrived at Yan Imperial City?" The moment he said that, Jin Ji and Shi Jixin's eyes lit up in surprise. Unknowingly, 3 days had passed. These 3 days were very long. "Not yet, but almost there," Qianlian Huang said softly. "It's not Yan Imperial City in front, but an oasis. It's a neutral teleportation formation at the border of the sorcerer tribe's territory. Through the teleportation formation, we can reach Yan Imperial City." Everyone nodded. Lin Feng's eyes lit up as he looked at Qianlian Huang. Obviously, it wasn't her first time here. These things couldn't be taught by words. They could only be learned from books. Oasis? What kind of place was that? Lin Feng was deep in thought as he looked ahead. As he continued to move forward, he could feel it more clearly. There were more than 1,000 auras. Soon, he could feel more than 10,000 auras. According to his estimation, there should be tens of thousands of martial artists in the oasis. It wasn't just the sorcerer tribe. Everyone, remember that you can't fight in the oasis. This is the rule of the sorcerer tribe, Qianlian Huang instructed. Yes. Jin Ji and Shi Jixin replied in unison. Lin Feng also nodded. There was such a rule, that was interesting. Lin Feng smiled. The distance wasn't too far away. As expected. Lin Feng's gaze deepened as he looked into the distance. This place was bustling with activity. The greenery was boundless, and it looked lively. It made one feel relaxed and happy. Rather than calling it an oasis, it would be better to call it a simple and crude village. There were many houses here, and many peddlers were calling out to each other. It was extremely lively. Wow! Oh! Shi Jixin and Jin Ji's eyes widened in surprise. From the looks of it, this place was like a human market, full of dazzling goods. However, the goods sold here were all extraordinary. There were all kinds of rare star fruits, materials, pills, and so on. There were even many Earth-rank astral treasures for sale. And the martial artists who were buying and selling were even more complicated. There were sorcerer tribe, ancient tribe, human tribe, and even other neutral races. Other than the demon tribe, there were almost all of them. There are so many races that I have never heard of. Their auras are so unique. Lin Feng's eyes flashed. All along, he had only paid attention to the demon tribe, sorcerer tribe, and ancient tribe. He had neglected the other races that lived in the Douling world. In fact, other than these two races, there were many other existences, such as divine beasts and ferocious beasts, as well as various kinds of wood spirits. Perhaps it was difficult for them to cultivate, but it didn't mean that there were no saint-level existences. There are many oases like this. Qianlian Huang said softly, however, the oases don't flourish just because they are close to the sorcerer tribe's territory. On the contrary, the closer to the border of the sorcerer tribe's territory, the more flourishing the oases are. Lin Feng listened and nodded slowly. In fact, it was easy to understand that the oases flourished because there were many more neutral races, ancient tribe, and even humans. Of course, it wasn't that easy to get here. For example, the four of them had traveled a long distance to get here. Those who weren't strong enough might have been killed by the sorcerer tribe along the way. Normally, the Union of Artificers and the Alchemist Union trade in the various oases. Qianlian Huang's beautiful eyes sparkled. Because of my father, I have entered the oases a few times. However, I have always teleported here directly. This is the first time I have come from the border. You can teleport directly? Jinji asked in surprise. Yes, only for special people. Qianlian Huang said slowly. The different races have different statuses in the sorcerer tribe's territory. Humans are basically the lower class. It seems that the sorcerer emperor despises humans. Other than the blacksmiths and alchemists who trade, the rest of the martial artists have to enter from the border. I see. Lin Feng suddenly understood. What about Yen Imperial City? Lin Feng thought for a while and asked casually. It's very special. Qianlian Huang's beautiful eyes flashed. Yen Imperial City is located in the depths of the sorcerer tribe's territory. However, it's special because it can be entered through a teleportation formation. If the oases are villages, then Yen Imperial City is the real city. Oh! Lin Feng's eyes sparkled. So you're saying that there are more trading goods in Yen Imperial City? Lin Feng looked at Qianlian Huang. Yes. Qianlian Huang nodded. It's much better than the oases. Regardless of price or quantity, there are all kinds of goods. In Yen Imperial City, there are even heaven-class treasures that are auctioned. See. Everyone took in a deep breath. They were even more curious about Yen Imperial City, and looked forward to it. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. Jinji said impatiently. Shi Jixin was also excited. What are the requirements to enter? Lin Feng looked at Qianlian Huang, his eyes sparkling. Jinji and Shi Jixin were stunned. Qianlian Huang answered, Not much. 1 primordial spirit per person is enough. Primordial spirit. Primordial spirits that only the saint-level sorcerer tribe members had. Not only were Jinji and Shi Jixin dumbfounded, but even Lin Feng couldn't react. This was too shocking. To enter Yen Imperial City, one had to meet such a ridiculous requirement? This was the sorcerer tribe territory. Wouldn't the existence of Yen Imperial City encourage the strong to hunt down the sorcerer tribe sages? Lin Feng frowned, feeling puzzled. But in an instant, his eyes turned cold, and he completely understood. Using battle to nurture battle. Lin Feng thought to himself. The sorcerer tribe doesn't lack sages. What they want the most is a true strong person who can fight against 100 and be invincible. Using the flames of battle to temper one's body and baptize one's will in battle is the goal of the sorcerer tribe. Anyway, even if a sorcerer tribe sage dies, his primordial spirit can still return. In the future, after absorbing the primordial spirit, another sorcerer tribe sage will be born. On the other hand, the strong people of the other tribes will become training partners and may lose their lives at any time. What a deep trap! Lin Feng's eyes sparkled as he thought to himself. Chapter 1292. Actually, the strongest of the sorcerer tribe are the sage kings. If you want to kill the sorcerer tribe, you can just kill the saint-level sorcerer tribe members. The sorcerer tribe doesn't care at all and won't pursue the matter too much, as long as it's not a massacre. But killing a sage king-level sorcerer is difficult. Qianlian Huang slowly said. Everyone nodded. Lin Feng was even more clear about this. In the past 3 days, he had bumped into a Saint King-level sorcerer tribe powerhouse. Even though he was much stronger than that Saint King-level sorcerer tribe powerhouse, that Saint King-level sorcerer tribe powerhouse had an Earth-rank gold treasure. In the end, he had managed to escape. The goal of the sorcerer tribe was very clear. Their main goal was to obtain Saint King level powerhouses. Indeed, the Saint King realm was an entire level higher than the Saint realm. Moreover, a Saint grade origin soul could be absorbed by a StarCraft grade origin soul, so what about a Saint King grade origin soul? Only Saint level experts could absorb it. The difference in base ratio was too great. However, not all forces are like this. Thousand Love Sovereign shrugged. We humans are in the inferior category again? Lin Feng smiled bitterly. Qian Lian Huang nodded and said, yes, the neutral forces that have a good relationship with the wizard tribe can enter without any conditions. However, the human powerhouses, even if they are at the Saint King level, have to follow the rules and hand over an original soul. Lin Feng nodded his head. So be it. I still have to make a trip to Yen Imperial City. As one of the most famous regions of the shaman tribe, as well as the only place where humans gathered, he definitely had to go to a place where he could live. Perhaps Ziyao was living there. Moreover, he also wanted to take a look at the trading goods there. Kane treasures aside, perhaps the extreme fire silkworm would be available for trade. Right, let's go, let's go. Jin Ji's eyes lit up. I'm looking forward to it, Shi Jixin said excitedly. Indeed, it was something to look forward to. Seeing such a bustling scene in the oasis, one could imagine the liveliness of Yen Imperial City. What kind of wonders would there be? Thousand Love Empress nodded. Let's go to the teleportation array. Everyone agreed. Let's walk and see. It was not crowded, and there were quite a lot of people coming and going around. The witch race and the ancient race made up the majority. There were also quite a number of powerful human beings, half of them Star Ocean Realm and half of them Saint Realm. Some came for business, some came for training, some came for treasures, and some came for cultivation. Their goals were uncertain. Unless they can teleport directly, they usually travel in groups. Thousand Love Emperor explained. Everyone nodded. Lin Feng also understood. With so many supercluster level martial artists, if they had come alone from the border, perhaps not even their bones would remain. Basically, no matter which race it was, there were no warriors below the Star Sea level. There were tens of thousands of warriors here, and hundreds of Saint-level warriors. It was quite terrifying. Moreover, the items being traded were all luxury goods with extremely high prices. Jingshi, medicine pills, astral treasures, not a single one was not rare goods. They were completely not on the same level as human territory. Basically, one could buy and one could sell. Both of them were valuable items that could be auctioned off in human territory. But here they were sold like jewels. What a huge difference! Lin Feng couldn't help but sigh. When would the southern region have such a scale? That would be great. Not only Lin Feng sighed, but Jin Ji and Shi Jixin also looked left and right, like Granny Lu entering the Grandview Garden. They didn't have the temperament of a saint at all. However, when the four of them walked together, they attracted a lot of attention. After all, the four saints were all humans. Most importantly, they were very young. Of course, it was just curiosity. It wouldn't attract too much attention. In the oasis, even Saint King level martial artists were very common, let alone Saint level martial artists. They might be young and talented, or have extraordinary aptitudes, but what was the use? No matter how good their aptitudes were, if they couldn't reach the Saint King level, it was just potential. In the Douling world, strength was the foundation. We're here. Thousand Love Emperor said softly. Looking in the direction of her finger, Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Dozens of teleportation arrays were lined up in a long line. Every time they were used, there would be a cooldown period of 1 minute. On the other side, many powerful warriors flashed in white light and walked out of the teleportation array. The scene was quite spectacular. However, compared to the number of people leaving, the number of people entering was much smaller. Of course, everyone's eyes would inadvertently look over. After all, it was quite boring to just wait. As Thousand Love Emperor joined the line, Lin Feng and the other three began to wait patiently. There were still more than 10 people in front. It was fast, only about 10 minutes. Soon, 5 minutes later, there were 5 fewer people in front. Lin Feng looked around in boredom. His state of mind was calm, and he was gradually getting used to it. Closing his eyes, he could still feel his heart palpitating. In these 3 days, it hadn't weakened at all. It was as if he had been doing the same thing. Although he didn't know the reason, it didn't affect his body much for now. What kind of place is Yen Imperial City? Could there be a powerful human warrior behind it? Will Zi Yao really live in Yen Imperial City? If she isn't, then where would she be? Lin Feng's eyes flickered as he pondered. The closer he got to Yen Imperial City, the more he missed Zi Yao. They had been separated for too long. That day, she left without saying goodbye, leaving only a letter. He knew clearly that it wasn't her intention. Back then, he couldn't change the fate of being separated. But today, Hia was different. If he found Zi Yao this time, he wouldn't let her leave again. Definitely. With this thought, Lin Feng's eyes flickered. Bits and pieces of the past appeared in his mind. There was warmth and suffering. Just as he was thinking, suddenly, purring, Lin Feng's head buzzed as his expression changed. He sensed an extremely strong aura appearing not far away. Lin Feng's train of thought was interrupted. He looked to the front and saw 2 figures, one in front and one behind, appear in his line of sight. The figure in front was very unfamiliar. He was dressed in luxurious clothes and had his hands behind his back. He looked like a proud son of the heavens. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and he wore silver diamond-shaped earrings. His eyes were crystal clear, as if he could see through everything in the world. Very strong. A Sage King-level super expert. With this kind of aura, he was clearly a person above all others. Lin Feng's eyes turned cold. Looking at this handsome young man, he felt a sense of suffocation from the bottom of his heart. Heaven and earth. The gap between him and him was huge. Who is he? Lin Feng pursed his lips. At this moment, the handsome young man's figure had been imprinted in his mind. However, this first meeting left a deep impression. But at this moment, when his gaze fell on the figure behind the handsome young man, his expression changed greatly. He was completely stunned. It's him. It's actually him. Lin Feng never thought that he would meet him here and at this time. The divine envoy by that head of white hair, a single eye patch, and an evil aura. His left eye, which was covered by the eye patch, seemed to contain some kind of demon. His thin body carried a shocking power, as if he was the reincarnation of an Asura. It was too familiar. He would never forget what happened in the ancient southern region. That day, he was trampled on like an ant and toyed with in the palm of his hand. In the end, although he was lucky to escape, he didn't rely on his own strength. Facing him, a wave of battle intent suddenly surged. The handsome young man seemed to have noticed something and suddenly turned his head. Bai, who was behind him, also turned his head and saw Lin Feng. His white hair fluttered in the wind. Bai looked at Lin Feng with undisguised killing intent in his eyes. The handsome young man exclaimed softly and turned his head to look at Bai again. He seemed to have understood something. With a strange smile, the handsome young man changed his direction and walked towards Lin Feng. Bai followed closely behind him with a cold expression and didn't say a word. At this moment, not only Lin Feng, but Qian Lian Huang and the other 2 also noticed the change in the scene. Their expressions suddenly became serious. 2 Saint King realm experts. Human? The handsome young man's eyes were clear and bright. He stopped in front of Lin Feng. "Hello, Lin Feng," Lin Feng said. Looking at his clear eyes, he couldn't tell what he was thinking. He didn't even know whether the handsome young man in front of him was a man or a woman. However, since it was the first time they met, he should have basic courtesy, regardless of whether he was an enemy or a friend. The handsome young man smiled faintly and stared at Lin Feng, sizing him up. His eyes seemed to see through everything about Lin Feng. The corner of his mouth raised into a faint smile, unfathomable. Jin Ji and Shi Jixin, who were slightly weaker, even felt a chill down their spines. Bai still looked cold, but the disdain and contempt in his eyes were obvious. He hated Lin Feng and even wanted to kill him. However, he couldn't fight in the oasis. Moreover, he came out with the young master this time. No matter what he did, he had to get permission. Suddenly, Gu Xing, the handsome young man, calmly extended his right hand with a faint smile. There seemed to be kindness in his smile, but it was hard to see through. Bai widened his eyes in disbelief. He didn't understand what the young master meant. Not only did he shake hands with a lowly human, he even told him his name. It was unbelievable. Lin Feng was slightly surprised, but he still extended his hand without hesitation. The other party's palm wasn't big. It was soft as if it had no bones. It was crystal clear and beautiful like a jade carving. It didn't look like a human's palm at all. They shook hands and let go. The two of them looked at each other. Gu Xing, Lin Feng said silently, remembering the name. However, he didn't see that Qian Lian Huang, who was beside him, had already widened her eyes in shock. Are you also here for it? Gu Xing smiled, but Lin Feng did not understand the meaning behind her words. Suddenly, the throbbing in his heart that had been calm suddenly became a little stronger, as if his heartbeat had become heavier. Lin Feng's expression changed slightly, and he looked at Gu Xing. He still had that faint smile on his face, but he suddenly raised his hand and patted his chest, as if he wanted to do something. If fate wills it, I'll see you then. Gu Xing smiled and said, I wish you good luck. As his voice fell, he closed his eyes and nodded. Then, Gu Xing turned around and left with a relaxed smile. He looked very carefree. Bai took a deep look at Lin Feng, then followed Gu Xing and left. Lin Feng's eyes kept changing. Who was this Gu Xing? His words and actions, what exactly were they hiding? Was there any special meaning behind them? Or perhaps, what was he trying to tell him? Chapter 1293. Who was it that Gu Xing was talking about? Or what was it? Lin Feng's eyes sparkled as every detail of his meeting with Gu Xing appeared in his mind. Not only did he feel more puzzled, he was even more shocked. Not to mention the strength of this handsome young man named Gu Xing. Just Qi's every move was enough to explain everything. Just like a master and servant. When they came out of the teleportation portal, they walked one after the other. Even if they left before Fengdu stepped into Gu Xing, they didn't even walk shoulder to shoulder. This is a difference in status. Most importantly, even though Qi wanted to kill me, he did not dare to overstep his status. Nodding his head, Lin Feng's heart trembled slightly. What happened just now was too sudden. When he first met Gu Xing, he was completely led by the nose and did not think about the meaning behind it. But now, all kinds of strange things were happening. He is definitely a big shot. Lin Feng nodded. Although he did not know who Gu Xing was, his status was much higher than the third divine envoy of the ancient god temple, Qi. What kind of shock was that? Lin De Ge? Shi Jixin called out to him. Lin Feng woke up. There was no one else in front of him. It was his turn to enter the teleportation portal. Lin Feng's eyes brightened. He shook his head and stepped aside. It was not time. He had not figured out the problem. He was not in a hurry to go to Yan Imperial City. Shi Jixin and Jin Ji were surprised. They did not ask and retreated to the side with Lin Feng. Anyway, it was not difficult to go to Yan Imperial City. Going through the teleportation portal was just a matter of queuing for a while. Their eyes were shining. Seeing Lin Feng and Qian Lian Huang's shocked expressions, they knew that the two youths were not ordinary. Especially when their strength was at the level of Saint Kings. Unfathomable. Lin Feng looked at Qian Lian Huang, who was beside him. At that moment, her expression changed. She was even more shocked than he was. Lin Feng's eyes brightened. Empress Lian, you know them? Qian Lian Huang's face was solemn as her eyes glowed. She shook her head and said, "How could I possibly know such a powerful person? Even the 12 saint lords of the human race would have to greet him respectfully." Shi Jixin and Jin Ji were shocked. However, Lin Feng wasn't surprised and asked, "How did you know?" Thousand Love Sovereign's eyes flashed. "You can tell from his surname." "Surname? Ancient?" Lin Feng narrowed his eyes and pondered. If Thousand Love Empress hadn't mentioned it, she wouldn't have thought about it. Although the ancient clans had their own tribes, they all had their own godly beasts. Fusing with and absorbing the blood of divine beasts and achieving the strength of an extraordinary Empyrean deity was something that all saints of the ancient race would be proud of and change their surname. For example, the Shifeng ancient clan that he belonged to inherited the Phoenix bloodline. As long as a male reached the saint level, he would be able to change his surname to Feng, while a female would be able to change her surname to Huang. Of course, there were also those who were loyal to the clan or had their own unique characteristic. For example, his mother didn't want her surname to be Huang and maintained the clan's surname to be Jia. Another example was the third divine envoy, Qi, who didn't care about the surname of divine beasts. However, more than 90% of the ancient race's saints would take on the surname of divine beasts. Right now, this Saint King expert, Gu Xing, had taken on the surname Gu. However, he didn't remember any divine beasts that had the surname Gu in them. "I'd like to hear the details." Lin Feng looked at Thousand Love Emperor. At this moment, Jin Ji and Shi Jixin's eyes widened in curiosity. "Do you know the origin of the Dou Ling world and the origin of the 3 human tribes?" Qian Lian Huang looked at the 3 of them and asked softly. Jin Ji and Shi Jixin immediately shook their heads. Lin Feng's eyes flashed and he shook his head as well. He had read a little about it in a book, but it wasn't complete. Qian Lian Huang nodded and said softly, "My father told me about it. It was passed down from ancient times, and it's hard to tell if it's true or not." After a pause, Qian Lian Huang slowly said, "Legend has it that in ancient times, the Dou Ling world was still in chaos. However, it attracted an earth-shattering battle in the starry world. In the battle between the experts of the starry world, the human expert, Pangu, fought against 3,000 demon gods. 1 man and 1 axe were invincible. This battle was earth-shattering. It made the Dou Ling world the main battlefield and changed the Dou Ling world from its foundation. In the end, both sides were destroyed and both died. The blood of 3,000 demon gods flowed into the ocean and turned into the 3,000 demon tribes and countless demon tribes. Pangu's body turned into the 12 ancestral sorcerers and countless sorcerer tribes. His soul turned into the ancient race and his blood essence turned into humans. This was the origin of the 3 human tribes. What an eye-opener! Jin Ji and Shi Jixin were completely entranced. Lin Feng pondered in his heart. He could totally imagine the shocking scene. Although he didn't know if it was true or not, it wasn't important. What was important was that he understood the origin of the ancient race's name. Pangu's power was concentrated in his body and soul. His body was Pan, which formed the sorcerer tribe of today. They changed their name from Pan tribe. His soul was Gu, which formed the ancient race of today. After Pangu's power, the sorcerer tribe changed their name to the sorcerer tribe because the 12 ancestral sorcerers developed a system. However, the ancient race was extremely respectful to their ancestor, Pangu, and had always kept the name of the ancient race. Especially the word Gu, which was especially revered. So this young man, Gu Xing. Lin Feng looked at Qian Lian Huang. If I'm not wrong, he should be one of the 7 ancient gods of the ancient race. Qian Lian Huang's eyes sparkled as she said seriously, in the ancient race, Only those who have reached the peak of the Sage King realm and are recognized by the ancient race experts can become ancient gods and be bestowed with the most glorious surname, Gu, which represents expert and status. There was a sound. Everyone took a deep breath. That young man is one of the 7 ancient gods of the ancient race? Lin Feng widened his eyes in disbelief. No wonder Ho was so respectful to him. The 7 ancient gods were transcendent existences that were only one step away from becoming a starry sky expert. But so young? Lin Feng frowned. Gu Xing didn't look older than him. Could it be that he was mistaken? Phew! Lin Feng sighed softly and nodded thoughtfully. It didn't matter whether he was mistaken or not. What was important was that his name was Gu Xing, and he was one of the 7 ancient gods of the ancient race. He was extremely powerful. Lin Feng was shocked. He closed his eyes, and the previous scenes appeared in his mind again. He was even more confused. Why would such a big shot take the initiative to greet him? He even told him his name. Judging from Ho's expression at that time, this was extremely inconceivable. Thinking back to Ho's shocked expression, it was normal. Even if a human expert reached the peak of the Sage King realm, he wouldn't take the initiative to greet a junior and tell him his name, let alone an arrogant ancient race. It was too strange. On the other side, Jin Ji and Shi Jixin pestered Thousand Love Emperor as if they were listening to a story. Their curiosity was piqued. Thousand Love Empress patiently told him everything she knew. The atmosphere was quite harmonious, and the slightly solemn feeling from before had already disappeared. As for Lin Feng, he was deep in thought. Knowing Gu Xing's identity and not knowing it were 2 different things. Every word that such a super expert said was very important to him. Even every change in expression had a considerable meaning. If he could understand it, he would definitely gain a lot. Especially, Lin Feng's eyes were deep. After carefully pondering over what Gu Xing had said to him, he realized that the focus was on it. Gu Xing seemed to have come here for it, and from his point of view, he had also come here for it. But what exactly was it? Should he know? Otherwise, why would Gu Xing say such things, as if he knew of its existence? Around. Quite around. Lin Feng pursed his lips and fell into deep thought. There should be a point that connected everything related to the existence of this unsolved mystery. What was it? Lin Feng's eyes were deep, and his mind was completely focused. Everything around him seemed to be blocked at this moment. Only the sound of his heartbeat, the feeling of breathing, and that familiar feeling of throbbing that had always been there and had never left. But his heart shook. Lin Feng's expression changed, and he suddenly remembered Gu Xing's action when he spoke. With a faint smile on his face, he suddenly raised his hand and patted his chest. It was as if he was trying to. Could it be referring to it? Lin Feng's eyes lit up completely. He had never tried to think in this direction because he subconsciously thought that only he had this feeling of throbbing. But if Gu Xing also had this feeling, what would happen? Lin Feng's body trembled and he clenched his fists. I understand. Lin Feng's eyes shone brightly. If he looked at the entire matter from this point, it seemed that all the problems would be easily solved. His right hand pressed lightly on his chest, and he felt the throbbing. Lin Feng took a deep breath, and his eyes shone brightly. He seemed to have made a decision. I want to find it, Lin Feng suddenly said. Qian Lian Huang and the other 2 were stunned, and they looked at Lin Feng in confusion. That Gu Xing mentioned. Lin Feng explained softly and pointed to his chest. To be honest, ever since I entered the sorcerer realm, I have always felt my heart throbbing, as if something was calling me. And now, I finally understand. So, you are not going to Yen Imperial City? Qian Lian Huang's beautiful eyes flashed. She was very smart. Lin Feng nodded softly and said apologetically, I'm sorry, I'm being stubborn. But actually, you don't have to accompany me. We can meet at Yen Imperial City when the time comes. What are you talking about? That's right. Jin Ji and Shi Jixin shouted. Qianlian Huang smiled. We are in the same team, and we will naturally listen to the team leader. If you want to come, we will come together. If you want to leave, we will leave together. As long as you don't find us a burden, it's fine. Of course not. Lin Feng smiled. Looking at the three sincere faces, his heart was filled with warmth. Advancing and retreating together, that is a true partner. Then let's go. Lin Feng smiled and said, All right. Chapter 1294. Oasis. A handsome young man was leisurely strolling around, looking left and right with a curious look in his eyes. Gu Sheng. Everywhere he went, he attracted a lot of attention. It wasn't because of his strength. In fact, without Lin Feng's level of observation, it was basically impossible to see how strong Gu Sheng was. 4 star lords and star realms, there wasn't much of a difference between the saint level and the saint level. What really attracted people's attention was Gu Sheng's appearance. He looked like a man and a woman, with delicate features and extremely handsome look. His translucent white skin was like the sound of nature, soft and delicate. As he walked, his silver diamond-shaped earrings reflected light, making him look even more mysterious. Also, his aura was too strong. This was something that couldn't be described with words. Like an emperor who had been in a high position for a long time, his every move had a domineering aura that looked down on the world. Although Gu Sheng wasn't domineering, he had a high and mighty aura that made people respect him. He was a natural emperor. Young master. A white light flashed behind him, and the white-haired Ho appeared. Speak. His words were concise. Gu Sheng was holding an exquisitely crafted sword at the stall, looking at it with interest. It was inlaid with luxurious metals and gems, looking extremely luxurious. It wasn't a sword for battle, but a kind of decoration. For the aboriginals who rarely touched weapons, it was very rare. They have already left the oasis and are heading east. A cold light flashed in Ho's eyes. Is that so? Gu Sheng smiled faintly. His finger lightly brushed across the sword, making a crisp sound. Young master, why did you? Ho stopped and frowned. He couldn't understand why such a noble young master would pay so much attention to such a bastard. Gu Sheng smiled and said softly, You and that Lin Feng seem to have some grudges? Ho nodded, his eyes flashing. I want to kill him. Without hiding anything, Ho looked at Gu Sheng. If he could, he really wanted to tear Lin Feng into pieces. Gu Sheng smiled faintly and casually waved the sword in his hand, making chi-chi sounds as it pierced through the air. From time to time, he would click his tongue. Now is not the time. He still has a lot of value. Value? Ho frowned in confusion. What value did a little bastard have? With Gu Sheng's status, what did she not have? Why would she need to make use of a mere human? The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. But Gu Sheng stopped his sword dance and played with it lovingly as he laughed out loud. Hey, pay up. You was slightly startled. He immediately reacted and quickly paid the money, just like a servant. The cultivator selling the sword widened his eyes as he stared at Gu Sheng in shock. He did not know who she was. To be able to make a martial saint behave like a servant. Don't forget to take the scabbard, Gu Sheng said with a smile, then left. After you paid, he casually took the scabbard and followed them, causing the surrounding people to burst into heated discussions. The two of them were like a beautiful scenery in the oasis. You know, Chi, we are like this precious sword, and Lin Feng, it's this unremarkable scabbard. Let's go. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled. He sensed that the aura behind him had already left. It had been following him since the oasis. The threat that entered his heart was familiar. However, compared to the powerlessness he felt back then, he now had the strength to fight. Previously, he could not sense his existence even if he was close. Now, even if the other party was following him, he could still clearly feel it. The third divine envoy, you. The super expert who had played him in the palm of his hand that day. There was no mistake. But now it had disappeared. It was not that he could not sense it, but the feeling was gradually weakening. It meant that you had given up on following him. Although he did not know why he came, why he did not attack him after following him, and why he suddenly left, it was obvious that it was related to Gu Sheng. "What's wrong, Lin Feng?" Thousand Love Emperor asked in surprise. Seeing that Lin Feng had stopped, Jin Ji and Shi Jixin also stopped. "Nothing." Lin Feng smiled indifferently. "Let's go." He turned around and glanced at the vast oasis. His eyes flickered, and then he left without looking back. There was no need to fear his existence. He would do whatever he needed to do. If you really wanted to kill him, he would not be able to hide even if he wanted to. At most, he would have another life and death battle. Although the chances of winning were slim, he would definitely be able to slash Yu's body even if he lost. Lin Feng's departure and Gu Sheng's arrival were just the beginning. The strange phenomenon in the sky was not only seen by these few people. In fact, any martial artist who knew a little about star divination could see the changes in the starry sky at this moment. An extremely strong force, with endless rays of light, was gathering in the sky above the sorcerer territory. It was getting stronger and bigger. It was like the rising sun. The sorcerer territory became lively. Countless martial artists entered through the border. The human race, the ancient race, and various neutral forces. Sage kings, sages, and even some daring peak star sector-level martial artists came to join in the fun. The demon race had not arrived, but the sorcerer territory had become lively. The sorcerer race itself was restless. Many sorcerer race elites could not hold back and set off. Who did not want to be above others? Who did not want to obtain treasures from the heavens? Those who were fated to obtain them. Lin Feng's group of 4 moved forward casually. Unlike before, when Qianlian Huang led the way and had a clear goal, the one leading the way now was Lin Feng. "Lin De Gu, where are we going?" Shi Jixin opened her eyes wide and asked curiously. "Stupid, of course we're going to look for treasures." Jin Ji glared at her. "Who are you calling stupid?" Shi Jixin put her hands on her hips and glared at him. "Who else but you?" Jin Ji was like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. He ignored Shi Jixin and said, "Even the 7 ancient gods of the ancient race came specially for it. It must be a heaven-defying and tyrannical treasure. If we can get it, tsk. Dream on." Shi Jixin snorted. "You want to fight with the ancient gods?" The two of them quarreled again and quickly deviated from the main topic. Lin Feng and Qianlian Huang looked at each other and smiled knowingly. They were already used to the quarrel between the two of them. "Thank you," Lin Feng said softly. Qianlian Huang smiled. "This trip is to gain experience. It's the same wherever we go. Moreover, you're the leader. Naturally, you make the decision." Lin Feng looked ahead and saw a huge plain with no end in sight. "Actually, I don't know where it is either." He sighed in his heart. Just like how he did not know where Ziyao was, he was also at a loss about the it mentioned by Gu Sheng. However, clues could be found. Just like breaking a formation, if one did not try, how could one break it? "There's no clue at all?" Qianlian Huang frowned and thought for a while. Then, her beautiful eyes flashed. "Didn't you say that you would feel your heart palpitate? Is there anything special about it?" "No." Lin Feng shook his head. He was very sure of this. Ever since he calmed down, the palpitations in his heart had remained the same. He was like a lazy cat, sleeping peacefully. However, it really existed. "Oh." Qianlian Huang fell into deep thought. There was a change. Lin Feng's eyes moved slightly as he said slowly, "When I met Gu Sheng, the palpitating feeling suddenly became stronger, but it quickly returned to normal." Looking at Qianlian Huang, Lin Feng said seriously, I feel that he is the same as me. We both have a connection to the same it. As soon as he said this, everyone immediately quieted down. Not only Qianlian Huang, but Jin Ji and Shi Jixin also looked over. This is the only clue. Lin Feng spread out his hands and said casually. The clue was insignificant. The three of them looked at each other. There was nothing they could do. Let's continue. Let's go and see. Lin Feng smiled and said casually, if it's ours, we'll get it. If it's not ours, it's useless to force it. Such a heavenly treasure still depended on fate. Time passed day by day. The sorcerer tribe's territory became more and more lively. Lin Feng and the other three were also very happy. Every day was spent in intense and exciting training. Although they were searching everywhere, there were treasures everywhere in the sorcerer tribe's territory. Moreover, there were many strange beasts, wood spirits, and even divine beasts and ferocious beasts. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was extremely dense. Basically, if the four-person team's training was to explore the terrain, Lin Feng would take the lead when they entered dangerous places. Qianlian Huang would cover the back, and Shi Jixin and Jin Ji would be in the middle. If they encountered a battle, Shi Jixin and Jin Ji would go first. If they couldn't win, Lin Feng and Qianlian Huang would take over. The division of labor was very clear. Lin Feng was also consciously training Shi Jixin and Jin Ji. The two of them were too inexperienced, and had little experience. I believe that after a while, they will be able to win against a sage sorcerer of the same level. Qianlian Huang's beautiful eyes flickered as she looked ahead. At that moment, Shi Jixin and Jin Ji were fighting a huge dark-light tiger together. A ferocious beast. It was in existence on par with divine beasts. Where there was light, there was darkness. If divine beasts were described as light, then ferocious beasts were described as darkness. In terms of talent, divine beasts were better than ferocious beasts. However, in terms of combat power, divine beasts were actually slightly inferior to ferocious beasts. Ferocious beasts were naturally violent and unusually ruthless. They were bloodthirsty and would even kill their own kind. Therefore, the number of ferocious beasts was actually less than divine beasts. An upper-level sage dark-light tiger. It was of the same level as Shi Jixin and Jin Ji. However, the strength of divine beasts and ferocious beasts could not be calculated separately. An upper-level sage ferocious beast's strength was comparable to a peak sage sorcerer. In fact, it was even more powerful. However, right now, Shi Jixin and Jin Ji were able to fight it on par. It was obvious. After entering the sorcerer tribe's territory, they have improved a lot. Qianlian Huang smiled, obviously very satisfied. In fact, to a certain extent, the improvement of their strength was due to her training. Is that so? She asked casually, but did not get a response from Lin Feng. Qianlian Huang snorted softly and turned to look at Lin Feng. She saw that his eyes flickered and he seemed to be thinking about something while looking ahead. She immediately asked curiously, "What's wrong, Lin Feng?" Lin Feng's eyes lit up and he said slowly, "Do you feel that something is wrong?" 2 more chapters, updated at 0:00. Chapter 1295. Inappropriate? Thousand Love Empress was slightly startled, her beautiful eyes sparkling. "You mean the appearance of these beasts?" Thousand Love Emperor asked. "Yes." Lin Feng frowned. "Divine beasts, ferocious beasts, and a large number of exotic beasts. Something is wrong." After a pause, Lin Feng pursed his lips. With the temperament of ferocious beasts, they would kill anyone they see, especially divine beasts. Why would they appear at the same time as the divine beast? Inappropriate. Not only here. In fact, since a few days ago, he had felt that there were some changes in the sorcerer tribe realm. It was a very subtle change, but he could not pinpoint it. Now that the ferocious beasts had appeared, it proved that he was not overthinking, but there was indeed such a thing. There must be a reason for this abnormality. The abnormality, in the sorcerer tribe realm, was most likely related to it. One coincidence could be a coincidence, but 2 or 3 coincidences appearing together was no longer a coincidence, but an established fact. There was a root to be found, and there was an invisible thread connecting them. Even if he could not see it, it did not mean that it did not exist. Thousand Love Emperor also pondered. With her sharp senses, she also felt that something was wrong, but it was not as clear as Lin Feng. You mean? Thousand Love Emperor looked at Lin Feng, her beautiful eyes moving slightly. Divine beasts, ferocious beasts, and even weaker exotic beasts are born from the gathering of heaven and earth spirit chi. They are born with the ability to sense heaven and earth, and are compatible with it. Lin Feng said slowly, their senses are the most direct and accurate. Because of its appearance, it gathered a strong amount of heaven and earth spirit chi, which caused the change. So, Thousand Love Emperor's beautiful eyes flickered. At this moment, they are all heading towards it? I don't know. Lin Feng shook his head. Maybe he's trying to avoid it. Thousand Love Emperor nodded. Indeed, this possibility existed. If it is as you guessed, isn't it a choice now? Thousand Love Emperor smiled. Lin Feng said softly, if we can reach that area first, the chances of finding it will be much higher than others. The difference of one step is like the distance between heaven and earth. The early bird gets the worm, but if it's late, there might not even be anything left. Let's not waste any more time. Lin Feng made his move. The ferocious beast, the Darklight Tiger, became more and more courageous as it fought. It gained the upper hand from a balanced situation and suppressed Jin Ji and Shi Jixin. Lin Feng's hand was blazing with flames. He didn't care about the beast's strength at all. He used the most ferocious method to kill the Darklight Tiger. Fast, ruthless, accurate. The Darklight Tiger, which had been swaggering around, was burned to ashes in the blink of an eye. It lacked astral treasures or astral weapons, and its speed was not as fast as Lin Feng's. In the case of defeat, the Dark Glory Tiger had no chance of escaping. All that was left was the vicious beast blood essence floating in the air. Its physical body had already turned to ashes. Shi Jixin and Jin Ji looked at Lin Feng in deep shock. In front of Lin Feng, the Darklight Tigers that had beaten them to a pulp were like little kittens that couldn't even withstand a single blow. He didn't even see it retaliate before it was killed. Too fast. They weren't on the same level at all. Lin de Go. Brother Lin. Shi Jixin and Jin Ji gathered together, a little nervous. This time, Lin Feng didn't come to their aid when they were about to be defeated. His help so early made the two nervous and unable to react. It's fine. Lin Feng smiled slightly, dispelling the nervousness in their hearts and letting out a sigh of relief. It's like this. Immediately, Lin Feng repeated what he had said to Thousand Love Emperor. Shi Jixin and Jin Ji nodded, suddenly enlightened. What do you think? Lin Feng looked at the two and asked softly. Shi Jixin murmured softly and smiled. I feel that these divine beasts and ferocious beasts are the same as us. They also want to become stronger. Lin Feng and Thousand Love Emperor nodded. It made sense. Saint-level divine beasts and ferocious beasts already had complete consciousness and thoughts. They naturally knew how to differentiate and pursue power. I don't think so, Jin Ji said solemnly. Every time there's a great change in the world, a heaven-defying existence will descend, causing natural disasters, earthquakes, and even lightning tribulations. Maybe these divine beasts and ferocious beasts are fleeing to avoid disaster. That's true. His words were crude but reasonable. It was normal for humans to seek fortune and avoid calamities. It was the same for divine beasts and ferocious beasts. Lin Feng nodded thoughtfully. Pooling the ideas of the masses was indeed better than judging by one person. Why do you always disagree with me? Shi Jixin said angrily, looking at Jin Ji angrily. I'm just stating facts. Jinji pursed his lips. Do you want me to flatter you and go along with you? I'm not interested in doing this kind of thing, Mississippi. You! Shijishin's face was red with anger. In an instant, the two started arguing again. Lin Feng and Thousand Love Emperor smiled helplessly, but let them be. Their opinions were quite precious. What do you think? Lin Feng looked at Thousand Love Emperor. I think. Thousand Love Emperor pursed her lips. Maybe we can try to split into 2 teams. 2 people in a team. Then one team will be able to find the right place. That's not very good, right? Lin Feng frowned slightly. Since I can sense it with my heart, the chances of finding it will be higher. If I can't sense it with my heart, even if I find the right place, the chances of finding it will be very small. The most important thing is, compared to other forces, our strength is too weak. Their strength was already weak. If they split up, wouldn't they be even weaker? Linda Gu, don't you have a clone? Shijishin suddenly interrupted and said angrily, I don't want to be with this guy. I want to go over there. Who wants to be with you? I'll go over there. Jinji was also childish. The two of them refused to give in to each other. The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener took it seriously. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Lin Feng's eyes lit up. He had a clone. Although his clone didn't have that kind of heart-palpitating feeling, his main body and clone could summon each other at any time. The answer to this choice was actually not that difficult for him. He could completely summarize it. However, Jishin's suggestion is not bad. Qianlian Huang's beautiful eyes flickered. Let's split up. If we find the right place, we'll build a teleportation formation. Teleportation formation? Lin Feng looked at Qianlian Huang. He was hesitating about this just now. He didn't care about it. However, if Qianlian Huang and the other two were to split up, there would definitely be one who chose the wrong path and had no fate with it. However, if there was a teleportation formation, the situation would be completely different. However, who would bring a teleportation formation with them? Moreover, unless it was an inscription master, no one would install one even if they brought one. Looking at Lin Feng's puzzled expression, Qianlian Huang couldn't help but chuckle. She pointed at Jinji and said, Lin Feng, don't tell me you don't know Jinji? Jinji? Lin Feng looked over. At this moment, Jinji was smiling and raising his head. Brother Jin, you have a teleportation formation? Lin Feng asked in realization. Of course. Jinji chuckled. I have as many as you want. Lin Feng let out a soft "oh" and looked at Qianlian Huang in surprise. The latter smiled and said, You don't know? Jinji's father, Jinwen, is one of the top inscription masters in the entire southern region. Although Jinji's main cultivation path is the martial arts path, it's more than enough to install an ordinary teleportation formation. Leave it to me. Jinji patted his chest and said confidently. TSK, you're so arrogant. Shijishin pouted and muttered. Can't I? I'm better than you. Jinji was unforgiving towards Shijishin. The latter was so angry that her face turned red. Lin Feng smiled. The quarrel between the two was actually the budding of a relationship. Jinji wasn't a talkative person. He only revealed such a character in front of Shijishin. It was enough to see how important Shijishin was in his heart. Perhaps even he didn't know that he had unknowingly fallen in love with Shijishin. Bystanders could see things clearly. However, the two people in the game did not know. However, there was no need for bystanders to participate in such matters. They could develop on their own. All right, it's decided then. Lin Feng smiled faintly. They split into 2 groups. His main body, Qianlian Huang, and Shijishin followed the direction of the divine beasts and ferocious beasts. His doppelganger and Jinji went in the opposite direction. They each took a path. It was the best of both worlds. Although they lacked soldiers and generals, the four-man team split up. However, their journey was faster and more concise. There was no need to train anymore. What they needed now was efficiency. Lin Feng's main body and doppelganger led the way without wasting any time. Tisk! Tisk! Flames flew. His main body carried Qian Lian Huang and Shi Jixin, so the pressure was reduced. They were gradually moving away from the center of the wizard territory. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was weaker, so the threat was naturally smaller. The reason why he let his main body choose this place was not based on judgment, but on intuition. This was because the first time he felt his heart palpitate the strongest was when he had just entered the wizard territory. On the other side, Jin Ji's mouth was slightly open. He was stunned, as if he was suffocating. TSK, TSK, TSK. In front, Lin Feng's illusions were everywhere. One man and one spear, like a demon god descending to the world. Jin Ji, who was also a heavenly martial artist, could feel how terrifying Lin Feng was. He was much stronger than before. Monster! Jin Ji muttered. He was extremely shocked. Previously, he was still a little worried about going deeper into the wizard territory. After all, the deeper they went, the greater the threat. In addition, if his judgment was correct, the descent of the heavenly treasure would trigger a catastrophe. If they entered, they would definitely be implicated. However, he didn't want to lose to Shi Jixin. Or rather, he didn't want to lose face in front of Shi Jixin. What kind of strength is this? Jin Ji was completely stunned. Lin Feng's main body was already strong enough. Who would have thought that his doppelganger was even more terrifying? It was unbelievable. The last time he fought side by side with Lin Feng was in the Sparrow King prison. When they faced the law enforcers of the ancient Divine Hall, Lin Feng had almost died. That battle was still fresh in his memory. But now Lin Feng's strength was 1,000 times stronger than that time. Too powerful. Jin Ji's eyes lit up as he looked at the battle in front of him carefully. This was like a textbook to him. Chapter 1296. Which path was the right one? No one dared to say with certainty, but this did not stop the strong warriors from entering. The sorcerer tribe realm was getting more and more lively. As time passed, the strange phenomenon in the sky became clearer. 3 dots and a line gathered together to form an extremely bright light, as if it had absorbed enough nutrients, illuminating the sky. It was the purest light source, the purest star energy. Looking at it from afar, one could feel the power of the heavens. It continued to grow. In the sorcerer tribe realm, as long as one looked up, they could see it clearly. Like a butterfly breaking out of its cocoon, it was only waiting for the right time. The days passed one by one. The time spent waiting and searching felt very rushed. Like a white steed flashing by, it disappeared in an instant. The number of people is increasing. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Yes, it's getting more and more lively. Qian Lian Huang smiled. I said it must be here, but you didn't believe me. Shi Jixin pouted. Although she said that, there was a hint of worry in her eyes. As the ball of light grew, the phenomenon became clearer, and one could feel that the power was quite strong. Everyone followed the ball of light and headed to the place closest to the ball of light, where they could see the ball of light clearly. Those with strong senses would head to the direction where the ball of light was the most intense. At this moment, the whereabouts of the divine beasts and ferocious beasts were not that important. In fact, be it divine beasts, ferocious beasts, or even strange beasts, they had already run away. At that time, Lin Feng was just a coincidence. However, most of the time, fate began from a coincidence. No one could predict how the real it would descend and where it would land. Including the mysterious strong warrior of the ancient tribe, Gu Xing, the powerful sorcerer emperor, and the countless mysterious strong warriors who had entered the sorcerer tribe realm, none of them knew. Thump, thump, thump. Lin Feng's heart was beating very fast, and his eyes were shining. Looking up at the sky, even though it was broad daylight, he could still see the ball of light clearly, as if it was calling out to him. It was a very clear feeling, a very touching feeling. It was close at hand. It should be here. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled. At this moment, he was 80 to 90% sure that his main body was the correct choice no matter how he looked at it. Along the way, he had seen many experts. Compared to the empty space around his doppelganger, there were countless experts from various forces gathered here. They were all rushing towards this area. It was densely packed. Each of them occupied a piece of land, but for the time being, they were at peace and did not interfere with each other. However, what was certain was that with the arrival of the heavenly treasure, an unprecedented chaotic battle would begin here. For the sake of seizing the heaven treasure, no one would give up easily. Since they had come here, it was impossible for them to shrink back. "They've all gone mad," Shijishin muttered. "That's for sure. It's a sight that's hard to come by in a million years." Thousand Love Emperor's beautiful eyes flickered. "As far as I know, no matter if it was the first or second war of the shamans, nothing like this happened. This time, the descent of the heavenly treasure will be unprecedented in history." Lin Feng nodded. He was also very clear in his heart. Looking at all the areas here, there would always be figures. Even if it was sparse, there would still be one or two. Greed was a sin, but it was also an excellent way to become stronger. He was no exception. "The chances are very slim. But if I can obtain this treasure, my strength will change greatly, and I will be able to compete with Sage King experts. At that time, the southern region will no longer be in a passive state." Lin Feng's eyes flickered. No matter how small the chances were, he still wanted to try. On the other side, the doppelganger had already brought Jin Ji deep into the hinterland. After more than 10 days of rushing, they had truly entered the central area of the shaman territory. Although there was still a long distance to the core area, they could no longer go forward. No matter how strong the doppelganger was, it was still at the peak of the saint level. There was still a layer of membrane that had not been broken through to the Sage King level. Jin Ji closed his eyes, his expression solemn. He was not cultivating, nor was he meditating. Frowning, Jin Ji was recalling Lin Feng's battle just now and was greatly inspired. A battle with a low-level Sage King, the Emperor River Shaman tribe. Among the 12 shaman tribes, the Emperor River Shaman tribe, which was ranked in the top 3 in terms of strength, was abnormally powerful at the same level. It could be said that they could easily win against a mid-level human Sage King and were almost comparable to a high-level human Sage King. Their speed was especially terrifying to the extreme. However, Lin Feng could fight one-on-one with them and not be at a disadvantage. In the end, he even won by a small margin and seriously injured the low-level Sage King of the Emperor River Shaman tribe. This was a true battle between Sage Kings, and it was a close-range battle. Jin Ji's gains were great. The Scorpio constellation's star seal on his forehead shone. Jin Ji's hands changed from time to time, carefully recalling this battle and putting himself in it. Whether it was the Emperor River Shaman tribe or Lin Feng, cold sweat dripped from his forehead, and he felt a deep pressure. This was too heavy a burden for him. However, the more it was like this, the more potential it could force out, and he could comprehend more. Jin Ji was never a person who would retreat from a difficult situation. Like Lin Feng, he also had the heart of a true martial artist. Huff! Gently exhaling, Lin Feng opened his eyes. "That was really close, I almost lost." Lin Feng stood up and clenched his fists, feeling refreshed. The battle with the low-level Sage King of the Emperor River Shaman tribe was very enjoyable and satisfying. It could be said that ever since his avatar's 7 spirits merged into one, he had never been so serious and fought a real battle. "It's a pity that I couldn't comprehend rising clouds in the end," Lin Feng muttered softly. His only regret. The battle with the Emperor River Shaman tribe was more of a contest of physical strength. The requirements for spear techniques were not high, and he had always had the advantage, so he could not find the feeling of spear technique. Swoosh! Starlight shone faintly. Lin Feng nodded in satisfaction. His star source energy had already recovered. Although his body was slightly injured, for this immortal body of his, it was just a matter of adjusting his breathing in an instant, and he had already recovered. Looking ahead, a pitch-black forest area gave him a terrifying feeling, but he could not go any deeper. If I encounter a mid-level sage king of the Emperor River Shaman tribe, I will lose. I'm afraid it will be me. Lin Feng thought to himself. It was not that he was timid, but that there was no need. Moreover, his avatar did not have any telepathy, so he could not determine where the real location was. He only knew that there were no signs of divine beasts, ferocious beasts, strange beasts, and so on. There were no signs of any living beasts within 100 miles. Logically speaking, this should be the correct area. However, there were no obvious signs. Other than the occasional shaman tribe, there were no other races or forces. Most importantly, his main body's telepathy was intense. When he looked up, he could see the ball of light. It was as if it was very close, and he could sense it very deeply. No matter how he looked at it, that was the place where the real treasure had descended, and it had attracted countless experts. So, are you going over? Lin Feng looked at Jinji. I'm not interested. Jinji shrugged and said casually, I think it's better to cultivate here. Lin Feng laughed. You're afraid of being teased by Shijishin, aren't you? How could that be? Jinji hurriedly denied, but his face turned red, as if he had been hit on the mark. Lin Feng saw his expression and smiled. He knew his character, but he did not expose him. Actually, it's not bad here. Anyway, it's crowded there. I'm afraid you can't fight for it even if you want to. Actually, he also wanted to continue fighting here. His avatar's strength had reached a bottleneck, and it would not be easy to break through. Using battle to stimulate his potential was not a bad idea. That's what I was thinking. Jinji's eyes lit up. Shaman tribe, ancestral Magus palace. This was where the highest authority of the shaman tribe was, and only the strongest 12 shaman kings were qualified to enter. The giant stone statues of the 12 ancestral Magus stood tall and lifelike. They circled around the ancestral Magi palace, forming a huge circle. Their ferocious faces and terrifying auras seemed to be able to swallow everything. The existence of these stone statues filled the entire ancestral Magi palace with majesty, as if it had come alive. The ancestral Magus palace did not have a roof. It was built in the open air to allow the 12 ancestral Magus to stand upright and not be restrained. At this moment, the shaman king, Dijiang, was looking at the starry sky with his hands behind his back. He was looking at the giant shining light ball with burning eyes. Brother, are we really not going there? The voice was loud and clear. The one who spoke was a ferocious monster with bone spikes all over his body, Xian Ming. He looked ugly, but he was not scheming. He looked at Dijiang's back and asked naively, Yes, brother. The Candle Dragon and the Shi Bai Shur have already gone there. He had 7 hands behind his back and 2 in front of his chest. He was Hutu, the one with the strongest defense among the 12 shaman tribes. Hutu had a serious face and a calm personality. Compared to Xianming, Hutu was more calm and intelligent. They were Dijiang's direct subordinates, and they were extremely loyal. Is there a need for that? The voice was very calm, revealing an extremely strong confidence. Shaman King Dijiang. He was a hero who had experienced the Second Great Shaman War and turned the tide. Each and every one of his actions was shocking. I'm afraid that the Candle Dragon and the Shi Bai Shur will get the treasure. I'm afraid that. Hutu frowned and looked worried. Yes, brother. If you don't go there, you won't get the treasure. If you go there, you might get it, Xianming said naively. Said Xianming. Di Jiang grinned. He turned around and looked at the two of them. His eyes twinkled. Do you know where the treasure is? Isn't it over there? Hotu was stunned. Yes? Xianming opened his eyes wide. Di Jiang laughed and turned around slowly with his hands behind his back. He looked at the starry sky and said, This kind of treasure has its own consciousness. It might not be what you want. God has blessed the shaman tribe to appear in the shaman tribe territory. It will belong to the shaman tribe. However, if it's not meant to be with me, what's the point of forcing it? His voice was loud and clear. Di Jiang's eyes were bright. He stretched out his right hand and said, If it's meant to be with me, it will come to me. Pang Rant's body was full of arrogance and confidence. He was the shaman king. The man who stood at the peak of the Douling world, Di Jiang. Brothers, give Xiao Xiao some monthly votes. Although you won't fight for it, don't rank too low. Sigh. Thank you. Chapter 1297. There were more and more people. They gathered at the edge of the sorcerer tribe's territory, right below the strange phenomenon. The experts from the sorcerer tribe, the ancient tribe, and countless experts from the neutral tribes had all gathered together. This included some black-clothed, masked, and unknown experts hiding in the darkness in the corners. They were all hesitating and preparing for the upcoming battle. There were too many experts hiding their auras in this area. Saint-level experts were nothing. Only Saint-King-level existences would truly dare to covet such a heavenly treasure. There are more and more people. Shi Jixin frowned slightly. This is only the edge of the sorcerer tribe's territory, so it's easy to enter. Thousand Love Emperor said softly. The ball of light is already very big. The heavenly treasure might appear at any time. Lin Feng's eyes were bright as he looked up at the sky. At this moment, he could see the huge ball of light clearly, as if it was engraved in his heart. Looking at it made his heart palpitate. In fact, with each passing day, the feeling became deeper. And now, with each passing hour, the feeling in his heart became deeper. It was as if it was calling out to him. Lin De Gu, do you know where it will appear? Shi Jixin lowered her voice and whispered. Thousand Love Emperor's beautiful eyes brightened. The two girls knew that although there were many experts fighting for the heavenly treasure, not many would be able to sense it like Lin Feng. Therefore, although the three of them were weaker, they still had a chance. Lin Feng smiled and shook his head. At this moment, boom! Boom! A violent explosion sounded. In this calm space, it was as if thunder had struck the ground. However, no matter if it was Lin Feng or the two girls, they did not panic at all. Such a situation had happened more than once in the past few days, and it was becoming more frequent. As the strange phenomenon became clearer, the experts became more anxious and uneasy. It was not only because of their bad tempers, but also because of the fight for territory. Although no one knew where the heavenly treasure would descend, everyone had a feeling. Perhaps it might not be correct, but they all believed that their feelings were correct. Seizing advantageous territories had already become a custom in this place. Some people would give in, but some wouldn't. How many times has it been today? Lin Feng smiled casually. Dozens of times, right? Thousand Love Emperor's beautiful eyes flickered, her expression clear. I really don't understand them. What's there to fight about now? Shi Jixin curled her lips. Lin Feng smiled. The area here was indeed very large, but the true core area could still be vaguely sensed. He could sense it, but so could some Saint King level experts. In the distance they could faintly see some Saint King level auras. In a place that their eyes could not reach, they had established a territory that belonged to them. It was a warning to other saints who were spying on them. But there was nothing he could do. The aura of a pinnacle saint was not enough to serve as a warning. Even if his strength was equivalent to that of a saint king, just talking was useless. Let's hope we're lucky, Lin Feng muttered. On the other side, it was a stark contrast to the bustling scene over there. Other than Lin Feng and Jin Ji, they would occasionally see one or two powerful warriors from the sorcerer tribe. All the divine beasts and strange beasts had run away. Even the wood spirits seemed to have migrated out of the land. This place was like a dangerous place, empty and empty. It was as if a disaster was about to happen. Brother Lin, why don't we retreat too? Jin Ji hesitated. It was quiet and unbearable. It made one's hair stand on end. It was like a dark hell. Are you afraid? Lin Feng opened his eyes and smiled calmly. I'm afraid I've implicated you. Jin Ji shook his head seriously. There was no fear in his eyes. It was his idea to come here. As a man, he was naturally fearless. However, he did not want to implicate Lin Feng like the first time. What are you talking about? We're a team. Lin Feng smiled and looked up at the sky. Although this place was very far from the ball of light, and compared to the hot place, it was like an unpopular place. Moreover, it was filled with ominous signs. However, he felt a sense of calmness. Perhaps it was the silence of this place that gave him this feeling. Or perhaps it was the realization of his clone. No matter what, it was not necessarily a bad thing. Whether it was an auspicious sign or an ominous sign, it was just a sign and not a fact. There must be a reason for this abnormality. He wanted to take a gamble. There was nothing to be afraid of if he lost. However, if he won, he would win this round cleanly and make a lot of money. The entire area was in front of him now. No one would fight with him. Fight. This word ran through the entire hot place at this moment. As the energy of the ball of light became more and more intense, the number of people increased. The fight also became more and more intense. It was not only the martial saints. Even the saint kings were fighting. The entire hot place was in chaos. The two girls looked into the distance with serious expressions. Another day had passed. The fight was getting more and more intense. Under such circumstances, could they be spared? The answer was no. Oh! Lin Feng was moved. He turned around slightly. In the distance, two Pang-Ran figures with strong auras appeared. This aura was clearly that of the wizard race. Both of them had the face of a human and the body of a beast. Their ears were like that of a dog. They were from the Shi Bai Lich tribe. Their huge bodies were at least 100 meters tall. They were Saint Kings. Swish! Lin Feng's eyes lit up. He frowned slightly. As expected, he could not avoid it. With the arrival of the strongest wizard race in this area, the situation of fighting for the rare treasure had become two extremes. After all, the wizard race was the strongest race. Whether it was in terms of numbers or strength, they had the absolute advantage. Whoosh! Whoosh! The two figures floated in the air, and looked down at Lin Feng and the other two. I'll give you 5 seconds to scram as far away as you can. Otherwise, die. The slightly stronger Shebi necromancer said in a deep voice, his eyes full of disdain and indifference. It was a familiar human language. There were no superfluous words, only threats. One was a mid-order Saint King, while the other was an early-order Saint King, so the Shi Bai Corps which clan was confident they could defeat these two. Only with strength could one be domineering. Oh! Lin Feng's eyes lit up and his heart trembled slightly. With Yang Kai's strength, if he were to fight a Saint King early stage Shi Bai Corps shaman one-on-one, he would definitely win. However, against a mid-order Saint King Shi Bai Corps shaman, Yang Kai's chances of victory were slim. Unless he sent an avatar here, with just his strength alone, even with the help of the two women, they were no match for him. However, retreating without a fight was not what he wanted. It was a bit too cowardly. 3, 2, 1. An ominous glint appeared in the eyes of the leader of the Shebi Corps wizards. He had already lost his patience and was about to attack. Words spoken were like water spilled. He was a Saint King shaman, so how could he lie? At this time, Qianlian Huang and Shi Jixin were already standing behind Lin Feng. Since they were a team, they would naturally face it together. How could they retreat? Leave one to me. Qianlian Huang's eyes lit up. Her voice fell directly into his ears. Lin Feng was quite surprised as he felt the aura of Qianlian Huang's soul increase in an instant. Along the way, he had not seen her true strength. He thought she might not have improved much, but now it seemed the opposite. Qianlian Huang's voice fell. If she did not have enough confidence, how could she be so sure? She was actually able to fight against a sorcerer tribe cultivator who was at the beginner level of the Sage King realm? Lin Feng's reaction was indeed a pleasant surprise. After all, Qianlian Huang was a true top genius of the human race. She was a Saint King shaman who had broken through 70% of the Saint realm. Her strength and potential were not bad. However, at this moment she did not need to fight. In fact, he did not need to fight at all. Because he was here. Hua. Pang Rant's aura descended, and the two Shi by shaman tribe members' expressions changed drastically. At this moment, the Saint King shaman tribe members' hearts all trembled. Many of the Saint King shaman tribe members' faces turned pale as they looked at the sky in disbelief. One after the other, two light figures arrived like the wind. They were not fast, but they were like emperors descending, making people look up to them. Gu Sheng. Servant Qi, you're here? Lin Feng's eyes lit up as he went up to welcome them. Just a moment ago, his heart beat violently, and he could feel it very deeply. He knew that Qi was here. Just like the first time they met, he and Gu Sheng were like two magnetic poles colliding. His appearance made the throbbing feeling even more profound. He did not know why, but it was the truth. It was also clear and distinguishable. Yes, it's my first time in the shaman tribe's territory, so I walked around for a while. Gu Sheng smiled. There was no murderous intent in his smile. However, at this moment, the two Shi by shaman tribe members' faces turned pale. They could feel the terrifying strength of this mysterious young man. It was hard to estimate. He was even comparable to their shaman king. Brother Gu, you're in a good mood. Lin Feng smiled. Although he did not know what Gu Sheng was up to, he should be polite since Gu Sheng was smiling at him. With a smile, Gu Sheng's eyes lit up. He raised his head and looked at the sky. That was close. I almost missed it. With a calm expression, Gu Sheng suddenly turned his head and looked at the two Shi by shaman tribe members. His eyes were filled with curiosity. His expression turned ugly. The two Shi by shaman tribe members did not dare to be rash. They did not dare to make a sound and quickly retreated. The world of experts was simple. The small fish ate the shrimps, and the big fish ate the small fish. Lin Feng smiled. He had saved himself a lot of trouble. I didn't expect. That old man didn't come. Gu Sheng looked around. His eyes flashed as he muttered to himself. Old man? Lin Feng was slightly stunned. Before he came back to his senses, Gu Sheng's gaze landed on him. With a faint smile, he said, Later, everyone will do their best. I wish you luck, Brother Lin. After saying that, Gu Sheng smiled and left. His valiant figure made Lin Feng jump crazily. What was that feeling? Thump, thump, thump. His heartbeat was extremely intense. The throbbing feeling in his heart had never been so intense. Lin Feng's expression changed drastically. He raised his head. At this moment, the huge ball of light was shining brightly. It was changing. It's here. It was finally going to be born. Chapter 1298. It had changed. Finally, it had changed. At this moment, all the experts in the hot land were looking up at the sky with their eyes wide open, holding their breath. Even the experts who were fighting over territory all stopped. They had been waiting for a long time, waiting for this moment before their eyes. The heavenly treasure was finally going to appear. Lin Feng's eyes were bright. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His heart had never palpitated so strongly before. It was a call, a strong call. In his mind, it seemed that the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. He felt an inexplicable domineering aura, and a roaring sound was ringing in his ears. A godlike existence, a giant that was countless times bigger than the wizard tribe, stood between the sky and the earth. In the face of the countless enemies rushing over, a terrifying power erupted in an instant. The existence of the giant was indomitable, like a pillar that supported the heavens, and nothing could shake it. Boom! 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 In his mind, a majestic power was ringing. A more vivid scene than the battle between the wizard tribe and the demon tribe suddenly appeared. It was vague and blurry, and he didn't even know what was going on. However, he felt a pain in his heart, and his body trembled inexplicably. Lin Feng wasn't the only one who had such a change. Gu Xing was the same. With his hands behind his back, he stood in the air. Behind him, Qi was guarding him with a serious expression. His eyes were slightly confused. Gu Xing's aura was chaotic. However, the proud figure didn't change at all. He just floated quietly. No one knew what Gu Xing was doing. Pang Ran's aura kept spreading out, making the surrounding time and space change strangely. Gu Xing's power could already affect the world. Extremely powerful. Wizard Tribe Ancestral Magi Palace. It's finally here. Wearing a golden robe, Dijiang looked up at the starry sky with bright eyes. His body didn't change at all. There seemed to be an invisible barrier around his body, blocking everything. Xian Ming and Hudu stood behind him respectfully. However, at this moment, as the starry sky in the distance shone, 3 light spots emitted bright light. The energy gathered like an explosion. The 3 light spots that represented the wizard tribe in the starry sky became bigger and bigger. The energy became more and more terrifying and huge. He couldn't control himself. Swish! Swish! On the Ancestor Magi Palace, the statues of the 12 Ancestor Magi suddenly emitted a strange light, which made Xian Ming and Hudu change their expressions in surprise. However, Dijiang's expression was indifferent, as if everything was within his expectations. I didn't expect to wait so long, Dijiang murmured softly. We have inherited Pangu's legacy. By right, we should be stronger than the monster race. But now that we are divided into 3, our strength is greatly reduced. Our ancestor was obstinate and self-opinionated. How could he have thought that the key point was actually the lowly human race? With a long sigh, Dijiang seemed to be reminiscing about something. After a long century and the second war of the liches and demons, Dijiang's face did not show any signs of aging. Instead, his eyes were filled with dominance and became brighter and brighter. He deserved to be the true emperor of the Douling world. There can be no construction without destruction. The ancient race is like that. The human race is also like that. 12 strands of King's Qi, suppressing the Emperor's Qi. How will the human race unleash their power? How will they bring about an opportunity in this war of the shamans and demons? Demon race, light flashed in Dijiang's eyes, and he suddenly burst into laughter. His laughter was full of arrogance, which reverberated between heaven and earth, as if he was standing on top of the world and looking down on everything. Your doomsday has arrived. Let me, Dijiang, send you on your way. Use your blood to commemorate the rise of the wizard race. Return to heaven's will. Pang Ran shouted, and Dijiang's aura swallowed the mountains and rivers. At this moment, Pang Ran's emperor aura burst out completely. Hudu and Xian Ming opened their eyes wide, looking at Dijiang. He was so close but so unreachable. The statues of the 12 ancestor magi bloomed with colors. All the light gathered and shot toward the sky. In the starry sky, 3 stars connected into a line. Under the shining light in the lead, it was shocking. It completely lit up the starry sky. Explode the light ball. Clang. It was like thunder, and lightning flashed. An anomaly descended from the sky, shattering the entire starry sky. At the place where the light ball gathered, it was like a butterfly breaking out of its cocoon. Extremely white light pierced out like the sun, and the energy poured out like shooting stars. It was like a meteor shower. Everyone's eyes lit up, and they almost stopped breathing. The countless shooting stars had different strengths and weaknesses. The color seemed white, but it was under the cover of the shining white light ball. When the shooting stars spread out and were far away from the white light, one would realize that it was not white, but colorful like a rainbow. Treasure. Earth-grade treasure, or even heaven-grade treasure. That familiar feeling of energy could not fool anyone. The senses of a saint and saint king were very strong. So much heaven energy burst out, but it was just the beginning. It was like a warm-up before the battle. However, at this moment, many powerful beings could not hold back anymore. They spread out, especially those weaker cosmic realm and saint kings. They had already made their choice. Give up the big for the small. Perhaps a true unique treasure of heaven would descend at that time. However, it was too difficult for them to obtain it with their strength. They might as well choose the best and choose something within their ability. Looking around, there were more than 100 shooting stars scattered in different places. It was a race against time. If they were fast enough, they would definitely be one step ahead of others. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. For a moment, there were sounds of air being torn apart. The hot land was turbulent and the aura was chaotic. The number of powerful beings was constantly decreasing. Zhixin, Lian Huang, quick! Lin Feng's eyes lit up and he suddenly shouted. This kind of opportunity could only be encountered and not sought. Although the two girls were with him, their chances of obtaining a unique treasure of heaven were actually very small. However, the distribution of these unique treasures was completely different. Those who were truly fated would obtain them. There were more than 100 shooting stars, and there was quite a lot of heaven-grade energy. Earth-grade ones were mostly white, black, and gold. To the two girls, this was undoubtedly a great opportunity. Moreover, because of the large number of unique treasures of heaven, the competition became much smaller, and the pressure was reduced. Most importantly, because the people fighting for the treasures were scattered, the danger was reduced by a lot. Sister Qian, let's take one side each. Shi Zhixin's beautiful eyes lit up, and she did not hesitate. Compared to when she had just entered the sorcerer tribe's territory, Shi Zhixin had now been trained. She truly dared to make decisions and take charge. The situation was changing rapidly, but Shi Zhixin's expression did not show any signs of panic. It was as if one was influenced by one's environment. Her personality was becoming more and more similar to Lin Feng and Qian Lian Huang. Okay, be careful. We'll contact each other when the time comes. Qian Lian Huang pointed at the compass and did not say much. There were many things that did not need to be said. In an instant, the two girls rushed to the left and right. Shi Zhixin rushed to the outer area of the sorcerer tribe's territory, while Qian Lian Huang rushed to the deeper area. At the crucial moment, they made the most concise and powerful decision. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Seeing the two girls leave, he was not worried. He did not need to worry about Qian Lian Huang at all. This woman's wisdom was even more mature than his. She was extremely experienced, and her strength was comparable to that of a beginner Saint King sorcerer. She was completely capable of obtaining the meteor treasure. Although Shi Zhixin was slightly weaker, she had improved during this period of time. Coupled with her own strength and many innate treasures, there was no problem for her to protect herself. Moreover, it was time for her to train alone. A martial artist must have the ability to face danger independently. Most importantly, the explosion of the light ball meant that the heavenly treasure was about to descend. Just the prelude was already so shocking. It was completely imaginable how powerful the real heavenly treasure would be. When the time came, there would be a fierce battle. Not to mention the two girls, even he did not have the slightest confidence. It was not the confidence to seize the heavenly treasure, but the confidence to protect his life. But it was very exciting. This feeling made him very excited. The more violent the wind and waves, the more bravely one had to face them. This was a true martial artist. He dared to challenge everything. The scattering of the meteor treasure was the prelude to the hot land. With this as the center, the scattering of the treasure had confirmed that this was the opportunity for the heavenly treasure to descend. With it as the center point, a meteor shower of rare treasures spread out, causing every single expert to be on guard. Their auras condensed. The real heavenly treasure was about to break out of the cocoon as the light ball exploded to the extreme. And this would be the most tragic battle. Who would be able to obtain the heavenly treasure? In the depths of the wizard tribe's territory. In the quiet forest, Lin Feng looked at Jin Ji and shrugged helplessly. Compared to the hot land, which was currently in chaos and bustling with noise and excitement, this place was quiet and unconcerned. It's really over there, Lin Feng said softly. Actually, he had already felt that the possibility of it being the hot land was much higher. After all, this place felt too strange and eerie. And with Gu Xing's appearance, he was already 90% sure. With his sensing ability, he naturally would not be wrong. Looks like I'm not fated to be with the heavenly treasure, Jin Ji said with a faint smile. There was no disappointment in his expression. It was within his expectations. But there are many meteor treasures scattering in all directions. We can try our luck. Lin Feng said casually. The simplest cooperation between the main body and the doppelganger was that the main body could clearly see and feel what was happening in the doppelganger's mind. That's good too, Jin Ji said with a smile. Maybe I'm fated to be with these meteor treasures? I think so too. Lin Feng also smiled. The atmosphere became much more relaxed as they joked around. However, at this moment Lin Feng was suddenly startled. Then, Jin Ji's eyes widened as he turned to look. Qi. An astonishing force, carrying a resplendent radiance, dragging a trail of afterimages behind it, streaked across the sky in an arc. Under the astonished gazes of the two, it actually fell from the sky. Bang! A spiky ball emitting a bright red light blasted a huge hole 50 meters in front of them. Lin Feng and Jin Ji stared blankly ahead, unable to react. Was this a joke? Chapter 1299. A bright red color. It was not the red color of the earth rank, but the powerful aura of the heaven rank. Lin Feng was a little dazed, and suddenly smiled bitterly. It was like planting flowers but not blooming, unintentionally planting willows and the willows grew. He had already guessed that he would not gain anything here, but it was a possibility after all, a dark horse. In a hot place, to obtain a heavenly treasure, one had to fight, and have extremely good luck. But here, as long as a heavenly treasure descended, he would be able to reap a great harvest. Even if the probability was less than 0.1%, it was still a possibility. Who would have thought that instead of a heavenly treasure, he would obtain a meteor treasure, and a heaven rank one at that? It was completely unexpected. Even if it was only a red rank, its ability was extraordinary. Compared to an earth rank black rank innate treasure, it was a level higher. Heaven rank was a true saint rank. My luck is too good. Lin Feng suddenly smiled. Although there were more than 100 meteor treasures, most of them were earth rank. According to his senses, there were only 10 to 15 heaven rank innate treasures, which was not a lot. But there was one in front of him. The two looked at each other and smiled knowingly. It's yours, brother Jin. Lin Feng's eyes flickered and he smiled lightly. No, it should be yours. Jin Ji shook his head and said seriously, I can't unleash the power of a heaven-ranked treasure with my strength. It was like they were pushing each other. The better their relationship, the harder it was to choose at this moment. Lin Feng looked at Jin Ji and said softly, "You need it more than I do. I already have a heaven-rank treasure. Moreover, you asked to come here, so you and it are quite fated." It was not a lie. No one would complain about having too many heaven-rank treasures, but he did not really need it urgently. Refining it was one thing, mastering it was another, and he did not have much time. In comparison, this heaven-rank treasure was more effective for Jin Ji. Absolutely not. Jin Ji's expression was serious. If not for Brother Lin leading the way, I would not have been able to reach such a deep place, let alone obtain the treasure. This heaven-rank treasure is more worthy of being in your control. The two of them looked at each other, but they couldn't see any deliberate thoughts in each other's eyes. These words came from the bottom of his heart. Suddenly, the two of them could not help but laugh. If it was any other cultivator, they would have already started fighting over it. How could they possibly give it up like this? This was a heaven-rank treasure, an existence of legends. With it, his strength would definitely rise to a whole new level. "Let's get it back first," Lin Feng said with a smile. "All right." Jin Ji nodded. In a flash, he entered the pit and bent down to pick up the bright red spiky ball. Lin Feng smiled faintly as he watched. Suddenly, a sudden change occurred. Hua! A bright red light shone in an instant. The red light illuminated the sky, and even more so, it carried a dense earth origin energy. The sharp thorns were like malevolent existences, and the bright red light was reflected above like fresh blood. Feeling the enormous aura and energy that instantly merged with Jin Ji, Lin Feng was instantly shocked, and a faint smile suddenly appeared on his face. It was destined. This was Jin Ji's opportunity. Accompanied by the dense earth energy, this heaven-rank red-class heaven-rank treasure was a priceless treasure to cultivators who were proficient in earth, but to him, its usefulness would be greatly reduced. Looking at Jin Ji, who was already enveloped by the red light, Lin Feng smiled cheerfully. There was no jealousy, only happiness for Jin Ji. "I hope Jixin and Emperor Lian can also have such gains like Jin Ji," Lin Feng said softly. There was no doubt about the usefulness of a heaven-rank treasure to a cultivator. Earth-rank treasures were mainly used on star sector-level cultivators, and at most, they were within the saint level. To Sage King-level cultivators, other than a few Earth-rank treasures, they were not very useful. But Heaven-rank treasures were different. This was a true saint level, a Sage King-level killing weapon, and for someone like Jin Ji who did not need to refine it, he could actively connect with the heaven-rank treasure's spiritual consciousness and obtain its approval, and he could even unleash the heaven-rank treasure's strongest power. Not only did it save time and effort, once the fusion was completed, Jin Ji would be able to use this heaven-rank treasure perfectly, and his strength would definitely soar. At that time, the southern region would have another true powerhouse. It's fated. Lin Feng's eyes lit up slightly. If the three of them had not mentioned it, he would not have thought that he would come to the sorcerer realm so early, and he would not have encountered the descent of the heavenly treasure this time. Many things seemed to be arranged by two hands in the unseen world. Just as he was thinking in his heart, Lin Feng was suddenly stunned again. He raised his head in shock and looked at a flash of light in the distance. It was even denser and more abundant than before. While he was still in a daze, it streaked across the sky above his head. It was as fast as lightning. Although its speed had become much weaker, and the afterimage seemed to be exhausted, but this was indeed a meteor treasure. Again, Lin Feng's heart beat wildly, and his eyes instantly lit up. It was slow to say, but it was fast at the same time. Almost like a conditioned reflex, the clone's resolute strength exploded with its strongest speed, and it chased after it at lightning speed. This time, he could clearly see the appearance of the treasure, and he could even sense that it was even stronger than before. Orange. It was a heaven-ranked orange treasure, an existence even stronger than Jin Ji's red-ranked treasure. What he lost at the swings, He gained at the swings. What was his would always be his. He could not escape. Whoosh! Lin Feng's eyes lit up. His body was like a whirlwind as he sped past. There was still an orange tail in front of his eyes. The afterimage slowly dimmed, but it was just within the range of his pursuit. Not more, not less, not far, not near, just enough for him to get it. This time, it's my opportunity. Lin Feng smiled calmly. In a hot place, expanding non-stop, it expanded like a balloon and a meteor bloomed. The white light condensed and exploded with unimaginable energy. Wave after wave of powerful light shot out. The loss of energy did not affect the birth of the heavenly treasure at all. There was no loss of energy at all. Instead, it became denser and more intense. At this moment, every expert was waiting calmly. The strongest power had already been condensed in their hands, waiting for the critical moment to appear. Thunder and lightning clashed. Heaven and earth collapsed. The heavenly treasure, under everyone's gaze, suddenly exploded with the most brilliant fireworks. Boom! The sky seemed to explode into pieces. Lin Feng's expression changed. A buzzing sound rang in his ears. The terrifying sound wave attack seemed to shatter his heart. At this moment, the weaker experts had already vomited blood. Their expressions were extremely ugly. In the sky, a huge figure seemed to appear. The roar was indomitable. The ball of light exploded and the light scattered. The illusory figure disappeared in an instant, turning into 3 brilliant lights. This is... Lin Feng's eyes widened. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 3 rays of energy were purer, scarier, and more rapid than before. Like huge waves, they attacked every expert's spirit. All the experts' hearts were beating wildly. Their eyes were red as they stared at the heavenly treasure. At this moment, it finally appeared in front of everyone. There were actually 3 of them. However, in the next moment, out of everyone's expectations, the 3 brilliant rays of light suddenly separated. Chi! 2 of the rays of light whizzed away. Their speed was so fast that it was impossible to catch up. Only a few of the experts saw how the other 2 rays of light left. All that was left was a beam of resplendent light. It was like a giant pillar that reached the heavens, and it descended from the sky with a loud rumble. The terrifying chi waves and pressure were like a mountain that crazily pressed down. The terrifying power could destroy everything. Everyone's expression changed greatly. It's here. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Although it was a little unexpected, there was indeed a heavenly treasure descending in this hot land. 1/3. In the depths of the sorcerer territory. Not long after Lin Feng left, when Jin Ji was wrapped in the bright red light, suddenly the ground shook crazily. It was as if a natural disaster had descended. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. Thunder clouds rumbled in the sky, striking down crazily. If one raised their head to look at the sky, they would see the blood-red color that covered the entire area. A terrifying murderous aura enveloped the area, as if it was going to destroy everything. A great battle had been triggered here. In the ground and in the air, there seemed to be remnants of the terrifying battle aura. If one could hear, they would be able to hear the mournful cries. If one could see, they would definitely be able to see the blood flowing in this wasteland. It was as if they were in hell on earth. This was a battlefield. Pa! Pa! The ground shook and the sky moved. The heavenly lightning overturned the entire area. Jin Ji, who was in the midst of comprehending and fusing, was completely unaware and unable to feel it. The entire area changed drastically. Countless heavenly lightning bolts fell from the sky, bombarding crazily. The energy flowed crazily, just like a catastrophe. Jin Ji had guessed correctly. This place, it was the fearsome land. Divine beasts were born with strong sensing abilities. They could seek good fortune and avoid calamity. Therefore, they would run as far as they could. And Jin Ji was trapped in it. Bzzz. Rumble. Thunder and lightning fell on Jinji's body, but they were completely blocked by the heavenly treasure. The natural disaster here was densely packed. There was no way to avoid it. If Jinji did not coincidentally fuse with the heavenly treasure, he would have been struck by the thunder and lightning. Even if it was Lin Feng's undying body, it would be enough to make him suffer. This was the true fearsome land. But the two of them just happened to avoid it. Amidst the thunder and lightning, a glaring light flew over from afar. The terrifying aura truly made one's heart palpitate. That was a power that did not belong to the mortal world. It surpassed the level of the martial saint. Its appearance was like the arrival of an emperor, causing the natural disasters to disappear in an instant. Or perhaps all of them were blocked by it. The thunder and lightning seemed to have been tamed and were extremely docile. Heavenly treasure. Hua! It floated in the air. The inner layer and the outer layer formed a strange space that resembled a bamboo sheet formation. Streams of energy appeared and enveloped the entire land. The appearance of various powers and energies made the entire fearsome land look brand new. Following the appearance of this mysterious heavenly treasure, the entire space underwent a unique transformation. It had come. Chapter 1300. In a hot place, thunder rumbled in the sky, and a huge beam of light fell like a pillar to the sky. Whoosh! Whoosh! In an instant, a few figures dashed out, trying to intercept this heavenly treasure in midair. However, before they could touch it, they were bounced back by the terrifying force. They were lucky that they were only bounced back. Boom! The force was broken, and a ferocious beast broke through the barrier. The strength of a peak martial saint was comparable to that of a sage king sorcerer. When it broke through the force, all the experts exclaimed. But in an instant, chi! It was just grazed by the side, but it was as if it was cut by a sharp sword. The terrifying force blasted the ferocious beast into meat paste in the air. Everyone's eyes widened as they stared at this horrifying scene. Their hearts were filled with shock. It was extremely terrifying. This heavenly treasure was not ordinary. Many experts who were still thinking about it stopped in their tracks, and their faces turned pale. No one wanted to follow in the footsteps of that ferocious beast. The huge light pillar fell with a loud bang. It's finally here. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. The arrival of the heavenly treasure moved his heart, and the feeling of palpitating was extremely deep. However, he could not do anything at this moment. The ferocious beast from before was a bloody reality. Perhaps he had a strong feeling of the heavenly treasure, and forcibly intercepting it would not be life-threatening, but even if he could get past it, with so many eyes looking at him, could he escape? Impulse was the devil, and his strength was not eye-catching here. He could only wait. Wait for an opportunity. Lin Feng thought to himself. The chances were very small. He wanted it, but it was not necessary. It was not worth it to lose his life for it. Boom! Thunder and lightning shook the earth. A terrifying force finally descended. The heavenly treasure landed on the ground. It was a huge light pillar, and it emitted a sparkling light. Powerful energy poured out wildly, forming an explosive aura through the ground. It was the purest power, the purest energy. With the huge light pillar as the center, it spread out in a circle. Boom! 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 The few powerhouses who were closest to the light pillar instantly met with misfortune. The terrifying shockwave blasted a saint-level expert into smithereens, sweeping away everything in its path. Not even a speck of dust was left. That was close. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. The distance between him and the light pillar was considered relatively close. However, just now, when the others were getting closer, he had retreated a lot, walking and watching at the same time to avoid an unexpected disaster. Fortunately, he had acted at that time. Otherwise, no matter how strong his body was, he would have been seriously injured. He could see that the two Shebi liches who had threatened him had gotten too close to him due to their anxiousness. Now they were vomiting blood, and their injuries were not light. One of them was a mid-level Saint King. Even someone as strong as the sorcerer tribe was in such a state, let alone the other experts. However, after all, there was a limit to the release of Qijin. The light beam fell straight down, and after the impact an energy aura spread out, it instantly disappeared. No matter how strong the energy was, it had already been depleted due to the distance and the resistance of the experts. At this moment, the real battle had begun. Xiao! Xiao! So! One by one, silhouettes dashed out. Their eyes were filled with desire. There was no need to doubt the strength of the heavenly treasure. Even if it was only a third of its power, it could easily injure a Saint King expert. It was obvious how terrifying it was. If one could refine it, just by relying on this treasure, one would be able to dominate the entire Do Ling world. Who didn't want to? Especially in this chaotic world, strength was fate. Controlling one's own fate. Boom! Boom! Countless origin energy blasted out, and Qijin exploded. The warriors at the front became live targets, and countless attacks from the celestial spirit masters followed like shadows, attacking their back. However, this did not stop any of the powerful cultivators. More powerful cultivators charged forward with no regard for their lives. Most of them were from the sorcerer tribe. Their powerful physiques allowed the sorcerer tribe to possess strong enough bodies to snatch the heavenly treasure. Chaotic battle. Close combat against close combat, close combat against close combat. There were even celestial spirit masters attacking from the outside of the light pillar. The hot land was boiling with heat. As expected, Lin Feng's eyes flickered slightly. Fortunately, he did not act rashly. Otherwise, he would be forced to fight even if he did not want to. Even if he wanted to escape, there was no way out. Those in front were surrounded by those behind, and those behind were surrounded by those behind. This place was in complete chaos. Inside and outside, the flames of war were boiling, and the soldiers were in chaos. Before any of the experts touched the huge light pillar, there were already corpses everywhere. There were countless casualties. Oh! Lin Feng's eyes lit up instantly. Sorcerer Tribe Territory, Ancestral Sorcerer Palace. Wearing a gold-threaded robe, Di Jiang had his hands behind his back, looking up at the starry sky. The shining light of the 12 ancestral sorcerer stone statues gathered at the top, reflecting the brightest stars in the starry sky. At this moment, the starry sky was shining like the sun, and an amazing power was radiating. It corresponded with Di Jiang from afar, forming a subtle connection. The aura and energy became extremely powerful. It caused Hutu and Xianming, who were behind, to be distracted and terrified. They were at the peak of the Saint King level. In an instant, a beam of light appeared in the sky far away, as if it was far away, but in an instant it came down like a shooting star. With amazing energy, it drew the most beautiful arc in the world, leaving a tail shadow, and flew toward the Sorcerer King, Di Jiang. Swoosh! Di Jiang's eyes lit up instantly. He raised his eyebrows proudly and suddenly shouted loudly. Bang! An amazing aura burst out, which was even more powerful than the pure energy of Hutu and Xianming. The terrifying energy shocked the world, and the 12 ancestral sorcerer stone statues seemed to be shaking. The horrifying aura of the earth and the flying light seemed to have built a bridge. They communicated with each other with the purest energy. Come! Di Jiang shouted fiercely. A strong aura surrounded his body, and the figure of ancestral sorcerer Di Jiang appeared clearly behind him. At this moment, it seemed to have merged into one, releasing a different kind of energy. Di Jiang's face was stern and proud. He stretched out his hands and suddenly opened them. Bang! A beam of light appeared instantly. It was an arc, the arc of the sky, in the shape of a crescent moon. Extremely powerful energy was shining, and the sharp blade was so thin that the edge couldn't be seen, but the sharpness of it was terrifying. The dazzling light seemed to be able to cut the world and the entire Douling world. It was the real extreme sharpness. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. He laughed wildly. Di Jiang laughed arrogantly, and he didn't hide the excitement and craziness in his heart. Light flashed. At this moment, Di Jiang held his hands, and the energy of his aura and the original star power merged with each other, creating a connection. The light sparkled, covering Di Jiang's body completely. It was illusory, but his aura had completely changed. Hudu and Xian Ming opened their eyes wide, and they were still confused. Before this, they had advised Di Jiang to fight for the heavenly treasure, but he didn't succeed. At that time, they didn't understand what Di Jiang had said. But now what Di Jiang had said was like a thunderclap, which made the two of them tremble from the bottom of their hearts, and they were deeply frightened. If it's destined to be me, it will come to me. Di Jiang's Pang Ran body was arrogant and confident. At this moment, the two of them finally understood what it meant. This was the strongest man in the Douling world. It was the will of heaven. In the depths of the wizard territory. It should be around here. Lin Feng's eyes lit up, and he floated in the air, looking around. Following the traces of the afterimage, he looked for the heavenly rank orange meteor rare treasure. Although he didn't have the same feeling as the heavenly treasure, his doppelganger was just a doppelganger. However, he could roughly estimate the area where the meteor rare treasure had landed. He searched patiently. Lin Feng wasn't in a hurry, and he couldn't be in a hurry. Compared to the illusory heavenly treasure, the heaven-rank orange meteor heavenly treasure was an existence that he could see and touch. He had to get one first. I almost forgot. Lin Feng smiled and shook his head. It would be a waste of time if he had to search the Pang Ran land one by one. There was someone who could help him. Come out, Wing. Lin Feng's eyes flashed. Wing, who was already at the saint level, was connected to his mind and followed him like a shadow when he summoned him. They were inseparable from each other and were extremely close. He had always let Wing cultivate with all his might, but he hadn't summoned him for a long time. Instead, Hong Ling helped him more. Don't worry, boss, watch me. Wing's appearance was completely different from before. He was more confident and stronger. He had already transformed as a saint and could cultivate on his own. He could even transform into a human form easily. However, Wing still appeared in his most primitive form. Because he knew what he had to do. Their minds were connected. They didn't need to speak and could communicate directly. Chi. 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 The branches and leaves sank into the ground. Under the red and green light of Wing, countless winged insects spread out with Wing as the center point. Compared to when he was at the star sector level, Wing's winged insects were a whole level higher in both quality and quantity. He was quite strong now. When he was at the Star Lord level, he had hundreds of thousands of winged insects. When he was at the Star Realm level, he had over 1 million. Now, there were 10 million of them. Their strength is one level lower than Wing's. They are now at the Star Realm level, but they are only equivalent to a Star Realm level 1. Lin Feng's heart trembled. Even so, it was already shocking enough. Tens of millions of Star Realm level 1 winged insects. How shocking was that? I almost forgot. Lin Feng smiled faintly. Wing's encounter was not bad, merging with the coiled wood origin seed was not much, but more importantly, Wing had completely merged with the Dragonfly Constellation's universe martial artist, Wu Qi's spirit, which contained all the mysteries and power of the universe martial artist. It wasn't any weaker than his own clone. Got it. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. In the blink of an eye, he found it. But it can't be? Lin Feng was stunned. What he found wasn't the heaven-rank orange innate treasure he saw before, but an earth-rank special innate treasure emitting golden light. It was indeed an unexpected gain. Chapter 1301. Golden Treasure. It was a special type. The most obvious characteristic of this treasure was one-time use. However, if it was used well, the power it could unleash could even be compared to a heaven-grade treasure. Like the power of demons, the golden treasure had a relatively strong ability and a high upper limit. However, its weakness was also very obvious. It could only be used once, and it also depended on whether it was suitable. Whoosh! Lin Feng suddenly dashed out. His speed was relatively fast, like a whirlwind. Of course, he could get Wing to retrieve the golden treasure, but many things might happen along the way. After all, this was the sorcerer territory. It was the territory of the sorcerer tribe, and sorcerer tribes could be seen everywhere. The sorcerer tribes that could live here were relatively powerful. There were many high-level martial saints and peak martial saints everywhere. If he let Wing retrieve the treasure, the chances of him getting it would be relatively small. He might as well let Wing do what he was best at: search. If he could find one Kane treasure, he could naturally find a second, or even a third or fourth one. Moreover, the chances were very high. Lin Feng's eyes were bright. The more ownerless items there were, the better. Any Kane treasure was expensive, not to mention that there was a heaven-grade treasure among them. It was relatively attractive. Even if he couldn't use it, Shun, King Lu, King Yen, and the other experts of the southern region could use it. This was undoubtedly a great opportunity to increase the strength of the southern region. Fast. In just an instant, the golden Khanate treasure was in his hands. Without any pause, Lin Feng's eyes were shining as he sped to the other side. Just as he had guessed, the orange-grade heaven-grade treasure that flew over his head was in this area. At this moment, he finally found it. Oh no, a sorcerer tribe member is approaching. Lin Feng's eyes were bright. With more than 10 million winged bugs, it was as if he had countless pairs of eyes in the sky, and he knew everything around him like the back of his hand. It was a Go Mang sorcerer tribe member that was almost 100 meters tall. He seemed to have sensed something and was searching around. Most importantly, he was searching in the right direction. Wing, hold him back! Lin Feng shouted decisively. Okay. Lin Feng smiled when he heard the voice in his heart. With the winged insect's strength, it was naturally unable to stop this Gomang shaman tribe expert. However, it was not difficult for it to delay him for a while. As expected, as the hundreds and thousands of winged insects appeared, the furious roars of the Go Mang shaman tribe could be faintly heard in the void, and the aura of battle instantly erupted. The battle had begun. Very good. The corners of Lin Feng's mouth rose. Although he did not know what method Wing had used, it was a great opportunity for him to make this Go Mang shaman tribe expert lose his cool and fight with the winged insect. As he flew closer and closer to the orange heaven-rank treasure, his heart leaped with joy. At this moment, he was already at the same level as the Go Mang shaman tribe. However, he was still fighting. It's mine. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled. There was a huge crater in front of him, and there was a bright treasure lying in the middle of the crater. It was sparkling and translucent, and it was so beautiful that the 5 colors paled in comparison. There was a clear orange glow in the middle of the treasure. He could sense it very clearly. It was a very powerful energy aura. But Lin Feng raised his hand and the meteor treasure landed in his hand. The energy sense was very strong, but it did not have a direct connection with him. It was as if they were just ordinary friends. It seems that I am not as lucky as Jinji. Lin Feng smiled calmly, not surprised. It was very difficult to be compatible with a heaven-rank treasure. It was not that the stronger one was, the easier it was to be compatible. This was a kind of fate. The strength of a heaven-rank treasure was related to its grade, but it was also important to be able to perfectly fuse with it and refine it. Even if he obtained a black-rank heaven-rank treasure, what was the use if he could not fuse with it? Whoosh! Lin Feng's expression was calm as he put away his orange heaven-tier rare treasure. He did not think too much and did not need to think too much. If it was destined to be his, then it could not escape. If it was not, there was no need to force it. Swoosh. Without stopping, Lin Feng left like the wind when he sensed that the peak sage of the Go-Mang shaman race was rapidly approaching. Although it was not difficult for him to defeat him with his strength, he had to seize every second. There was no need to waste a lot of time on the essence soul. After all, a battle was full of variables. Leaving was the best plan. 10 seconds later, angry roars could be heard in his ears. It was the language of the shaman race. Lin Feng smiled. Even if he didn't understand, he guessed that it wasn't anything good. He was probably cursing him. At this moment, he was far enough away from the Go-Mang shaman race expert. He could not sense him and would not chase after him. He had obtained a heaven-rank orange innate treasure. What he lost on the swings, he gained on the roundabouts. He had missed out on a heaven-rank red-grade Xiantian treasure, but he had gained even more. 1 gold and 1 orange. He had gained a lot. Moreover, it was not over yet. Damn it! Wing's scolding voice sounded in his heart. Lin Feng smiled. This was the 3rd treasure that Wing had found. It had been taken by a shaman race expert. It was a white-rank earth-rank innate treasure. However, it was not of much use to him. Suddenly, Lin Feng frowned. Wing's line of sight quickly extended to the area he had just come from, which was where Jinji was. He should be in the midst of fusing with the heaven-rank red innate treasure. However, he could not see his figure at all. All he saw was a strange, illusory color. The area had completely changed. What was going on? Lin Feng was stunned. A bright light flashed violently. Countless thick barriers formed a bamboo-like shape and rotated continuously under the influence of a terrifying energy in the center. It covered an extremely large area. The shocking centrifugal force created an illusory land, as if there was a great mystery. However, no matter how wonderful it could not be compared to the place where his gaze was focused. Jinji had disappeared. How could this be? Lin Feng's expression changed. He had only left for a short while, but the fearsome land had undergone such a huge change. Where did the barrier formation and the terrifying energy come from? What was going on with that intense light? Most importantly, where did Jinji go? Could he be in danger? Cold sweat dripped down Lin Feng's forehead. His heart instantly tightened. If Jinji was in danger, he would definitely have to bear a lot of responsibility. At this moment, the feeling in his heart came again. Wing's line of sight fell into his eyes. The black light was extremely bright. The familiar energy in the distance was undoubtedly the meteor rare treasure. Wing quickly spread out to search and found the 4th meteor rare treasure in a short period of time. He was not surprised. It was within his expectations. This place was far away from the scorching land. Even if the experts from the scorching land rushed over at their fastest speed, they would be too far away. However, with the help of Wing's ability, he could easily obtain more treasures in the surroundings. However, whoosh! Lin Feng rushed forward. His eyes were bright and he did not hesitate at all. At this moment, nothing could compare to the mysterious barrier formation. It could not compare to Jinji's sudden disappearance. He would rather give up these meteor rare treasures than let the others in the team encounter any danger. Since he had brought them here, he had to bear the responsibility. Because he was the team leader. Wait for me, Brother Jin. Lin Feng's expression was serious. His eyes were burning. He had to find Jinji as soon as possible. The longer he delayed, the greater the possibility of danger. Ancestral Magi Palace. Whoosh! Whoosh! Following the descent of the heavenly arc, it connected with the Dejiang. The light was dazzling. The entire Ancestral Magi Palace underwent a huge change. the light from the huge stone statues of the ancestral magi gathered to the peak. It was the most dazzling star in the starry sky, symbolizing the power of the magi. Originally, the brightest and most eye-catching star in the starry sky was the demon emperor's star. However, following the blooming of the Magi's star, not only was it on par with the demon emperor's star, it had faintly surpassed it by a little. Boom! The power of heaven descended. Behind Dijiang, Hutu and Xian Ming opened their eyes wide, looking at the scene in front of them in horror. They had been speechless for a long time. From the moment the heavenly ark found Dijiang, to the moment when the light gathered and shrouded, the rapid surge of the aura seemed to contain a great mystery. Although they couldn't see anything under the light, they could feel that the energy was constantly being released. The heavenly ark's Pang-Ran energy. So powerful! Hutu was shocked. Her face was solemn. So powerful! Is this the rare treasure of heaven? Xian Ming muttered to himself, looking silly. Become stronger. Dijiang's aura was constantly increasing. He was already standing at the peak of the Douling world. Now Dijiang seemed to break through the sky, and was increasing without limit. The heavenly ark was like a primer, attracting the power of heaven and earth. The 12 ancestral magi gathered everything, and the celestial bodies caused the confrontation between the magi and the demon clans to break in an instant. Just because of one person, Dijiang. How strong would he become? No one knew. Just like the second war between the magi and the demon clans, no one could have guessed that the magi would win the war. And the hero of that war was the transcendent existence in front of them, the highest position and leader of the magi emperor. In a hot place, 3 rare treasures. One fell toward Dijiang, which was the furthest away. The second fell toward the ominous land, where Lin Feng was. The third fell straight toward the hot place. The fight for it was intense. Although more than 1/3 of the powerhouses went to pursue the other 2 rare treasures, the number of powerhouses who stayed here was still very shocking. Facing the rare treasures in the center, which were within reach, the giant flashing pillar made all the powerhouses go crazy. Bang! 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 It was a mess. You hit me, I hit you. There was no distinction between friend and foe. Even between the magi, there was no modesty at all. At this moment, all of their nature was exposed. Greed. Perhaps they were saints who were high above. However, in front of the rare treasures, all the glory of a saint was thrown aside. Everyone longed for power. The neutral martial artists were like that. The Magus kings were like that. Gu Sheng was like that. Lin Feng was like that too. However, power did not necessarily mean that one had to obtain the rare treasures. At this moment, Lin Feng's lips curled up slightly. His eyes flashed, and he seemed to have a plan in mind. Chapter 1302. What were the chances of obtaining a heavenly treasure? Lin Feng was very clear. Extremely weak. Even if he were to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight, even if he were to wait for an opportunity, would he be able to grasp it? Simply put, if this light pillar were to fall into his hands, would he be able to protect it? With so many experts watching him, would he be able to break out of the encirclement? The answer was obviously no. Even if his fate with this light pillar was extremely strong, the palpitations in his heart were very strong, and he was even certain that if he could touch this light pillar, there was a 50% chance that he would be like Jin Ji, directly fusing with it and turning the heavenly treasure into a part of himself, unleashing its power. However, even if he had it, would he be able to fight against a group of enemies? After all, he was only at the peak of the saint level. His foundation was too weak. There are already more than 10 Saint King level experts here who have revealed their strength. Lin Feng was secretly shocked. At this moment, those who were hiding their presence or hiding in the dark were even harder to estimate, and the biggest threat was probably one of the 7 ancient gods of the ancient race. Gu Sheng. Like him, he had a connection with the heavenly treasure. However, he had the strength of a peak Saint King level expert. If nothing special happened, he would not be able to compete with him. He indeed had to wait for an opportunity, even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance. He would not give up, or else he would have decisively gone to look for the heavenly treasure like the 2 girls. However, before that, he could completely place his focus elsewhere. For example, Origin Soul, Divine Beast Essence Blood, Vicious Beast Essence Blood, and Innate Treasures. Not only Saint level, but also the rarely seen Saint King level. The strength of the experts here was more terrifying than the previous one. Earth-ranked purple-grade innate treasures and white-grade innate treasures were not eye-catching at all. The experts who were killed while fighting over the heavenly treasures dropped Earth-ranked black-grade innate treasures were everywhere. However, no one would fight for it, even if it was just a matter of convenience. In front, a Saint-level expert had just distracted himself to grab the white-level astral treasure beside him, but in the next second, he was blown away. Not only did he not get the white-level astral treasure, but he also lost his life. There was also a white-level and a black-level astral treasure. It could be said that he was extremely unlucky. Without tyrannical strength, how could he allow himself to be distracted in this kind of group battle? The battle became more and more intense, and the number of experts who died increased with each passing moment. A few experts were killed almost every moment. So many. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Even though he was an outsider, he could feel how rich the battlefield was. It was unimaginable. The Witch Clan's origin soul was like cabbage, and no one took a look at the divine beast's blood essence. There were dozens of the most precious heaven-ranked treasures on the battlefield. In terms of quality, it might not be as good as a meteor exotic treasure, but its quantity was terrifying. In the blink of an eye, the number had reached 3-digit. It was obvious how intense the battlefield was. Blood flowed like a river, and it was like hell on earth. Roar! The ferocious roar caused the earth to tremble. In the distant horizon, a violent blood lion flew over. Its huge body was not slow at all, and its pair of bone-chilling eyes were filled with killing intent. This terrifying aura had already reached the high-order Saint King realm, and to the masters who were fighting on the front lines at this moment, this was definitely the most powerful existence. Ferocious beast, frost blood dragon lion. Ice bloomed, forming a bone-chilling frost. The arrival of the frost blood dragon lion had truly opened up the white-hot battle for the light pillar. With its appearance, there was no doubt that the situation would change. At this moment, all the masters' gazes were focused, and they were extremely solemn. Lin Feng's eyes lit up, but he retreated lightly. He retreated instead of advancing. Lin Feng's expression was calm and composed. Sensing the aura, he found the direction with the fewest people. It was a cave covered in weeds, and he stepped into it instantly. "Come out, Wing." Lin Feng's eyes lit up. The heart's call made Wing, who had just retracted the winged bug, appear once again. With the soul of the contracted Fey connected, the saint-rank Wing had even more power than before. Whether it was summoning or his own strength, he was already the best helper. Whoosh! Red and green light bloomed dazzlingly, and Lin Feng smiled. "It's up to you now, Wing." He spoke softly. Lin Feng looked at Wing. They didn't need to speak much to understand each other's intentions. They had fought side by side since they were young and had experienced countless life and death situations together. The one who understood his thoughts the most was Wing. "No problem, boss." Wing was very excited. However, he was able to display his ability once again. Branches and leaves shot out in a frenzy, spreading throughout the narrow cave. Soon, they covered the entire area. The winged bug burrowed into the ground and headed straight for the hot land. Countless gazes appeared once again, and Lin Feng's eyes were sparkling. In such a saint-level battle, The winged bug, which was only a first-order star sector grade, wasn't important at all. Plus, it was moving underground, so its concealment ability was rather strong. Most importantly, there were a lot of winged bugs. There were more than 10 million of them. Lin Feng launched his attack. It was an unconventional method of attack. Just as everyone was fighting for the watermelon, Lin Feng picked up the sesame instead. Although it wasn't far from the hot land, no one would pay attention to this lousy place at this moment, and there were no benefits at all. Moreover, why would a Saint King be interested in a mere essence soul, divine beast essence blood, or even a black-grade connate treasure? Compared to heavenly treasures, these were indeed just sesame seeds. Bang! Boom! Crackle! Countless attacks flashed before Lin Feng's eyes. Lin Feng's expression changed slightly, and his heart raced. Even though he was mentally prepared, he was still shocked. Sharing the winged bug's vision, it was as if it was being attacked by all the powerful beings. He entered the battlefield. Of course, these attacks weren't really directed at the winged bug. In this group battle where every second counted, a moment of carelessness was enough to be fatal. No powerful being would waste their attacks on a mere star sector grade bug. The attacks just now were just a ripple effect, but it was enough to kill the winged bug. However, it didn't matter. Compared to the number of winged insects, there were simply too many. At this moment, the number of treasures on the battlefield was also huge. Essence souls, connate treasures, divine beast essence blood, and even storage rings. All of them were left behind by saint-level powerful beings. Regardless of grade or grade, there were already more than 200 of them. And they were still increasing. Even though the winged bug's success rate was very small, the large area had increased the ratio. It's here. Lin Feng's eyes suddenly lit up. The first batch of winged bugs broke through the encirclement. The black light was so dazzling at this moment. They brought along a black-grade connate treasure. Rich colors of power and sparkling light. Lin Feng couldn't help but clench his fists. Everything was just as he had expected. The weaker they were, the more they could gain on this battlefield. If the winged bug carried the treasure out, the chances of leaving the battlefield alive was less than 1 in 10,000. But so what? It was fine as long as there were enough of them. If 1 time didn't work, 2 times. If 2 times didn't work, 3 times or 4 times. They weren't afraid of exhaustion at all. As the saying went, one could make a fortune without making a sound. While all the experts' gazes were focused on the light pillar and the Saint King-level ferocious beast, the frost blood dragon lion, Lin Feng had quietly obtained 10 treasures. Most of them were the sorcerer clan's origin souls, followed by the divine beast's blood essence and earth rank innate treasures. And this was just the beginning. Oh, it seems like the Witch King has made his move. Lin Feng's eyes lit up slightly. Through the winged bug's line of sight, he could see a supernatural being that was 100 meters tall. It was exactly the same as the she-by lich that had threatened him before, but its power was deeper and purer. Its aura was even more powerful than the Saint King-level ferocious beast. It wasn't just its power, but also its aura and the feeling of being superior. The appearance of the ferocious beast, the frost-blood draconic lion, caused the situation to heat up. The pillar of light stood tall and upright, forming a white barrier around it. Whoever could break through first would have a considerable chance of success. However, there weren't many powerful beings who could simultaneously attack the white barrier and defend against several powerful attacks at the same time. It was very difficult, but with the addition of a true Saint King-level powerhouse, the situation instantly changed. Whether it was the Frostblood Dragon Lion or the Witch King She-by Lich, they all had the ability. And they weren't the only ones. Whoosh! Whoosh! Chi! Streaks of light and shadow appeared one after another. After the intense warm-up at the beginning, the real fight had begun. This was the stage of the Saint King-level powerhouses. They fought each other, and the explosive power was enough to destroy the heavens and the earth. Even the surrounding saint-level powerhouses were affected. A white-hot situation, but to Lin Feng it didn't matter. Standing on the outside, Lin Feng leaned against the dry cave wall and looked at the chaotic battle. He was rather relaxed. 28th. Lin Feng counted. Whether it was Saint or Saint King level, the slaughter of the winged bug was a one-time thing. On the contrary, with the rise of the Saint King level attacks, many Heaven Spirit Masters tactfully stopped attacking, afraid of offending the Saint King level powerhouses. This increased the chances of the winged bug surviving. The speed of obtaining treasures increased by several times in the blink of an eye. 31, 32, 33. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Although there wasn't anything too valuable, many little drops made an ocean, and there were quite a lot of them. Moreover, as there were more things, there would always be something good. Oh, a ring? Lin Feng's eyes lit up. It was a simple and unadorned ring. The patterns and colors on it were very strange, and there were unknown words engraved on it. He didn't know which neutral force it belonged to, but it was obviously a storage ring. The craftsmanship and energy felt quite good. Just as he was observing, Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He looked at the entrance of the cave. The 10 winged bugs had carried an origin soul that was extremely rich in energy. It was even purer and larger. A Saint King level origin soul. Lin Feng couldn't help but smile. Does this count as me profiting from a battle? After obtaining a Saint King level origin soul, Lin Feng felt quite good. Even if he couldn't obtain any more battle results in the end, just these treasures alone made this trip worthwhile. He had profited greatly. Chapter 1303. Which Clan Realm, Fierce Ground. After obtaining an Earth-ranked gold treasure and a Heaven-ranked orange treasure, Lin Feng decisively stopped and rushed over as fast as he could. However, just as what he saw in the winged insect's eyes, this place had already changed greatly. The huge forest seemed to have been leveled overnight, not even its roots were left. The air was emitting a strong evil aura, and the smell of blood was extremely strong. It was like purgatory on earth. Hey! Hey! The roars of malicious spirits came from beside his ears. There were countless phantoms in front of him that seemed to be attacking him. They had ugly faces and disgusting smells. The sky had completely changed color. What was going on? Lin Feng's eyes were filled with doubt. However, at this moment, the illusion in front of him was attacking rapidly. He could not afford to be distracted at all. He had to deal with the danger first. Break. Lin Feng's eyes focused. The star source energy was released, and his mind was focused. A firm will was the most direct and effective way to deal with illusions. However, Lin Feng's eyes revealed surprise. It's not an illusion? Unexpectedly, these malicious ghost-like existences flickered and did not disappear before his eyes. Instead, they still pounced on him with bared fangs and brandished claws. The shrill cries entered his ears, as if they were shattering his eardrums. It was as if he had entered hell. Lin Feng frowned. It was very real. The ghostly figures in front of him moved, and their auras were faintly discernible. It was as if real ghosts had been reborn. What's going on? Lin Feng raised a question in his mind, and his expression slowly turned serious. In front of him, these ghosts and illusions passed through him like fog, but they did not pose any threat. Inexplicably, his heart suddenly trembled, and he reflexively shot his body to the side. Chi! As if he had been slashed by a sharp sword, a bloody groove appeared on his body, and blood flowed out. Lin Feng's expression changed. He was injured. Boom! The star source energy suddenly exploded, and Lin Feng instantly turned around. However, the ghost just now seemed to have disappeared in the blink of an eye, as if it did not exist at all. Lin Feng's expression changed, and a chill rose up in his heart. His gaze was profound, but this time, his reaction was extremely fast. Leaping off the ground, a vicious aura pierced through the place where he had just been. Reaching out his hand, Lin Feng's eyes flashed as star source energy condensed and burst out. Pung! The ultimate explosion landed. The ghost exploded due to the force of the blow. At that moment, there seemed to be a series of wails around them, accompanied by shrill screams. In an instant, countless ghosts shot out from the surroundings, heading straight for Lin Feng, who was in midair. Their attacks were fast and fierce. Good. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. The most annoying thing was a sneaky ambush like just now. He had nothing to fear from such a frontal attack. Clang! The amethyst spear shone brightly. During this period of time, although he was unable to comprehend the spear move clouds rise, his strength had still steadily increased. Lin Feng brandished his amethyst spear. In an instant, his arrogance soared to the clouds, sweeping everything before him. How could a mere ghost be stopped? One person, one spear. Lin Feng was excited to fight, but he was more and more puzzled. Very calm. However, this place was very strange. There were endless ghosts, wave after wave of attacks, as if there was no end. Most importantly, some of the ghosts did not have any attack power, they were just illusions. However, some of their attack power was as if they were real. There were strong and weak attacks, there were no characteristics at all. He could only rely on his intuition to barely distinguish them. There must be a demon when things are abnormal. This is indeed a fierce place. No wonder all the divine beasts fled. Lin Feng frowned slightly. At this moment, he understood something in his heart. He seemed to have fallen into a trap. But how did the trap here change? And these inexplicable ghosts, in the end? Lin Feng thought, but his movements were not slow at all. He raised his spear and swung it down. His body was full of courage, and those evil ghosts could not get close to him at all. The consumption of star source energy was enormous, but he had to face these illusions that seemed real and illusory. His eyes slowly lit up. Lin Feng muttered to himself. Soon, he came up with a plan. Most likely, it has a lot to do with the birth of the heavenly treasure. Lin Feng pursed his lips. If it had nothing to do with it, how could it be so coincidental? It did not change earlier or later, but chose to change at this time? There must be a connection between them. However, he could not say what exactly was going on. As Lin Feng attacked, he looked at the ground and saw that it was completely blood-red. Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat as he replayed the scene he saw earlier in his mind. Each scene gave him a sense of déjà vu, battlefield. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. These ferocious ghosts attacked like vengeful spirits who had died with their eyes wide open. He thought of what the winged bug saw just now. He could clearly see a huge stone wall array, operating under the guidance of a strange energy. The location was where he and Jinji were before. However, right now he could not see it at all. What a powerful illusion technique! Lin Feng's heart trembled. At this moment, he was sure that he was in deep trouble. The doppelganger was different from the original body. Perhaps the doppelganger was stronger than the original body, but in terms of breaking this kind of trap and resisting illusions, the doppelganger was far inferior to the original body. Such a powerful illusion must be at least at the Saint King level. It was half illusion and half reality. If he could break it, it would be an illusion, but if he could not, just like now, the attacks were real. No. Lin Feng shuddered inwardly. If this continues, I will exhaust my strength sooner or later. But, closing his eyes, Lin Feng reacted quickly. The longer this dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. He had to break these illusions as soon as possible. His mind was calm, and everything around him was clear. Even though there were tens of thousands of chaotic auras attacking him, He would rather suffer a little injury than waste any more time. He had to break it. Purring! Purring! Heavy blows landed on his body again and again. Lin Feng's face turned pale. He grunted a few times. The protection of his star source strength could not completely resist these ghostly forces. At this moment, he did not use any defensive technique. He even gave up on the 7 ultimate heavenly star bead. This was because he had to use his purest heart to sense, using the most realistic feelings and pain to stimulate himself. There! Lin Feng was moved. Even if the interference was great, his heart would not be shaken. Xiao! Like a sharp arrow, Lin Feng's expression was solemn. The attacks around him were like wind and rain, bombarding his body, but he did not care at all. To him, even if he was injured, he had to find the real way out and find the secret to break this illusion. He could not delay any longer. It was a short distance, but it felt like torture. However, the clear distance allowed him to clear his mind and pass through the illusion. In an instant, his body seemed to have broken free from its shackles, and the whole world was peaceful. Although the energy around him was clearer and more powerful, there were fewer distracting thoughts and illusions. Lin Feng stepped on the ground. It was real. This time it was real. Whoosh! Opening his eyes and looking at everything in front of him, Lin Feng's eyes flickered slightly. This was not unexpected. At this moment, he was indeed here. It was the same scene as what the winged bug had seen before. A huge wall of earth and stone stood tall like bamboo, with no end in sight. A strange energy circulated in this formation, driving the earth and stone walls to move at an extremely fast speed. Forward, backward, layer by layer, stack by stack, it was difficult to distinguish between reality and illusion. This was obviously a large formation. Although he did not know how it was formed, he was certain that there must be a great secret behind it. "Brother Jean, we should be trapped in the formation," Lin Feng said softly. The formation covered a large area, enveloping the entire land. The strange energy in the formation not only drove the formation, but also seeped out like fog, constantly releasing in the surroundings, little by little, forming a dense fog. Illusion, Lin Feng muttered. The illusion he saw just now was the transformation of the formation's power. Just the energy alone was already so shocking, needless to say, this huge stone wall formation must be even more terrifying. The leakage of energy dyed the sky into a misty color, the land was a blood-red color, and he seemed to be able to hear the cries of ghosts and howls of wolves. This place was like a real land of danger descending. The scenery was extremely strange. To enter or not to enter? Phew! Exhaling lightly, Lin Feng's expression was solemn as he sat cross-legged. Closing his eyes, he absorbed the qi of heaven and earth to recover the star source energy that he had consumed before, and also to recover his own condition, adjusting his breathing to the peak of his strength. As for the external injuries he had suffered just now, he did not need to care about them at all. With his body's extraordinary recovery ability, he could recover in a short time. In fact, there was no need to consider at all. He did not have a second choice. He had to enter. There was more than a 90% chance that Jean Ji would be trapped in the formation. As the team leader, he had the responsibility to protect his safety. As a friend and brother, he could not watch him die and let him die alone. But before that, he had to recover his strength and adjust to the best condition. Because this trip would be very difficult, even 9 deaths and 1 life. In a hot place, the situation had truly entered a white-hot state. From the fight between the Saint-level powerhouses to the battle between the Saint-level powerhouses to the battle between the Saint-level powerhouses, everything had been simplified. Although many Saint-level powerhouses still wanted to obtain the heavenly treasure and were still hoping for a fluke, the difference in strength was a clear indication of reality. In front of the Saint-level powerhouses were nothing at all. Boom, boom, boom. The ferocious beast Frost Blood Dragon Lion and the She-By corpse which tribe fought fiercely, neither giving way to the other. At this moment, the Saint-level powerhouses who had entered the battlefield were even more fearless, driving away all the Saint-level powerhouses who stood in their way without mercy. To them, this was just a matter of lifting a hand. There were light injuries, serious injuries, and many were killed. Since they had the courage to enter and fight for the heavenly treasure, they could imagine this ending. Corpses were everywhere. At this moment, the battlefield had officially entered the second part of the fierce battle. The Saint-level powerhouses were gradually eliminated, and many of the weaker Saint-level powerhouses had also suffered misfortune. Among them were the 2 Saint-level She-By corpse which tribe members who had threatened Lin Feng earlier. Purring! Purring! The 2 powerful corpse which tribe members were killed almost at the same time. Among the first batch of powerhouses to enter the battlefield, the 2 She-By corpse which tribe members were undoubtedly stronger. They were also the ones closest to the light pillar, so naturally, they became cannon fodder. The one who struck first had the advantage, but he might not have the last laugh. But, 2 Saint-level essence souls appeared, and a different kind of light flickered. Whoosh! Lin Feng's eyes instantly lit up. Chapter 1304. A slightly bright red light. Beside the 2 Saint King-level origin souls, it flashed with a demonic color. It was similar to the red color that Jin Ji had fused with. Lin Feng's eyes widened in joy. This was obviously not an Earth-level red treasure. 2 Saint King-level She-By liches could not be so inferior. The red light must be Heaven-level. It was the first Heaven-level red treasure to appear on the battlefield. It was a legendary existence in the human territory. Although it was rare in the sorcerer realm, it did not mean that it did not exist. There were more than 30 Saint King-level powerhouses here, and more than half of them were sorcerer realm powerhouses. Everyone knew that the sorcerer realm was the most wealthy race, even more so than the monster realm. Legend had it that the sorcerer realm was the ancient battlefield where Pangu fought the 3,000 demon gods. In an instant, countless winged insects changed their direction and flew towards the red light. Good guy. Lin Feng laughed. But Wing's reaction was faster than his, as if he was addicted to taking advantage of the situation. Almost instantly, another attack descended, and the winged insects that had just appeared turned into nothingness. The power of a Saint King-level powerhouse, even if it was just a little bit, the power of the aftershock was very strong, not to mention how fragile the winged insects were. It was far beyond imagination. Like porcelain. However, they won in terms of quantity and scale. Batch after batch, they charged forward like a suicide squad, one after another. Wing would not give up until they reached the Yellow River. At close range, the attacks were the fiercest, but even if they were blasted into pieces again and again, they were still unwilling to give up. There would always be gains if they persevered. Good! Lin Feng's eyes lit up. For the first time, the winged insects came into contact with the bright red color. Just as he had expected, it was indeed a heaven-level treasure. Wing had already transmitted the message clearly, and his voice sounded quite excited. No matter how crowded the battlefield was, there would always be gaps. But the winged insects did not have any gaps in their coverage, and bit by bit, they carried the heaven-level red treasure out. Although they were killed by the aftershock countless times, their perseverance was amazing, and they quickly left the battlefield like a relay race. Not good, boss. Lin Feng's eyes flashed as an anxious voice sounded in his mind. The winged insect flew at high speed, trying to escape in a frenzy. However, this time, it was being chased by a powerful warrior of the sorcerer tribe, who was a mid-level saint. Sure enough, it still attracted attention, Lin Feng thought to himself. As the battlefield became more and more heated, the number of Saint Kings taking over the fight for the heavenly treasures not only decreased, but to some extent, the frequency of their attacks also decreased. Taking advantage of this period of time, his harvest had already exceeded 100 items, and it could be said that his basin was overflowing. However, where there is gain, there is also loss. The saint-level powerhouses gradually retreated to the rear, watching the tigers fight from afar. This also caused the winged insects' actions to become more brazen. No one cared about it before, but the bright red light in front of them was a real treasure. A red heaven-tier innate treasure. "There's another ancient race expert, boss," Wing shouted, afraid that Lin Feng would make a mistake. It attracted 2 experts at once. Indeed, the value of a heaven-rank Xiantian treasure was too high. "I know." Lin Feng calmly stepped out of the cave. Such a situation had long been within his expectations. How could one not wet one's shoes if one walked by the river too often? However, the Saint Kings were all focused on the light pillar, and the remaining experts were only some saint-level powerhouses, who were soft persimmons to him. What was there to fear? Bang! Boom! Lin Feng descended like a heavenly general. He raised his spear and the rich star source energy swept through everything before him. Regardless of whether it was the sorcerer tribe expert in front of him or the ancient race expert behind him, they were all killed in the blink of an eye. Scheming against the unsuspecting, coupled with the fact that his strength far exceeded his opponent's, winning was as easy as blowing off dust. It was too easy. Greed. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled. He was not only referring to the 2 experts who wanted to be the mantis stalking the cicada, but also to himself. Being too greedy would not lead to a good outcome. "Let's stop for now, Wing," Lin Feng said softly. "Ah." Wing was rather surprised. "It's about time. There's no need to fight for these ordinary treasures." Lin Feng's eyes sparkled. There was no need to take risks for these treasures. It was not worth it to be exposed. Earth-rank treasures, essence souls, and divine beast blood essences. In total, he had obtained more than 100 items during this period of time. His harvest was plentiful enough. This time, the red heaven-rank treasure was undoubtedly a turning point, because the winged bug had already attracted the attention of some people. If there was a first time, there would definitely be a second and third time. As the number of people participating in the battle decreased and the number of spectators increased, every detail on the battlefield could attract attention. Ordinary treasures? Wing was surprised. "So, boss, you mean, high treasures are worth fighting for?" Lin Feng's eyes flashed. "Let's take advantage of the fact that we haven't been completely exposed and rest. We'll attack when the good stuff appears." No one would complain about having too many heaven-rank treasures, especially now that he was shouldering the fate of the human race. He stopped when appropriate. After being exposed this time, Lin Feng wisely chose to stop. He was not retreating in the face of adversity, but temporarily stopping. The winged bug still covered the entire battlefield, deep in the soil. It could be said that it could attack or retreat. It was as if there were countless eyes on the battlefield, spying on the entire area. Silence. This was the winged bug's most powerful concealment ability. Of course, it could not hide from Saint-level and Saint-King-level powerhouses, but now who would care about these small fries? Fight. This was the main theme of the battlefield. Blood flowed like a river, and wails resounded in the sky. The battle between Saint-King-level powerhouses was even more terrifying and earth-shattering. Many Saint-level powerhouses in the surroundings had already retreated, all of them widening their eyes and holding their breaths, watching this unforgettable scene. There were more than 20 Saint-King-level powerhouses fighting, 1 against 1, 2 against 3, 3 against 5. At this moment it was a chaotic scene. Many Saint-King-level powerhouses who had already exposed their auras retreated outside the circle, or were seriously injured, or were waiting for the best opportunity to enter. Every powerhouse's goal was very clear, and it was only the existence of the heavenly treasure. As long as they could obtain it, they would become the top existence in the Do Ling world. How attractive was that? This is too crazy. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled. He was not eye-catching among the saint-level powerhouses. At this moment, he could not help but feel that his previous decision was correct. Although he had the strength of a Saint King-level powerhouse, he was not eye-catching at all here. Even a mid-level Saint King-level Lich tribe member was killed. If it were him, he would probably end up in the same situation. The space here was chaotic and had long been sealed. There was no way to escape. This was a sealed battlefield. Win or lose, live or die, everything was decided by strength. Trying to be brave would only lead to death. I wonder who will have the last laugh, Lin Feng said. After letting go, he was calm. In any case, he had already earned enough. Whether or not he could obtain the heavenly treasure, he did not need to be too obsessed. It was better to watch quietly. Witnessing the battle between these Saint King-level powerhouses with his own eyes was also beneficial to him. Such a grand occasion was rare. He looked around but could not sense Gu Xing's aura. He did not know what he was up to. Until now, he had not made a move. He was still waiting for an opportunity, waiting for the best opportunity. Peng! A violent explosion resounded. Lin Feng's heart jolted and he looked over. It was the corpse wizard King Shi Bai, who was fighting the ferocious beast, the frost-blood dragon lion. He was slightly injured, but he had beaten the ferocious beast to its last gasp, and he wasn't in his previous state. The Shi Bai corpse wizard king had not killed the frost-blood dragon lion. Instead, he was attacking the light pillar barrier under its protection. Very smart. Lin Feng praised inwardly. If he killed the frost-blood dragon lion, he would inevitably attract a second opponent. Not killing the frost-blood dragon lion was like carrying a protective talisman. No experts would dare to join this battle because they would be besieged by two great experts at any moment. It was truly unwise. Moreover, the Shi Bai corpse wizard king's strength was tyrannical and rarely had a worthy opponent. In addition, more than half of the wizard tribe members on the battlefield were his companions. Hence, he was in a very advantageous position. Favorable location and people. However, was the right time or not? The answer was yes. Peng! Another attack as heavy as 1,000 caddies, surging like thunder. The Shi Bai corpse wizard king roared wildly, carrying a deep and domineering aura. He raised his hand and clawed down. At this moment, cracks had already appeared on the light pillar. As the rich star source energy bloomed, the Shi Bai corpse wizard king rapidly punched again and again, shattering the light pillar continuously. Shattering again. He truly displayed the absolute power of a wizard king. All the powerhouses widened their eyes at this moment. They had been waiting for the most crucial moment, and now it was right in front of them. Bang! Completely shattered. The light pillar shattered like a mirror. At this moment, the light pillar's only defense had been shattered. It was like a city that had lost its protection and its gates were wide open. All the Saint King-level powerhouses' eyes turned red in an instant. They rushed madly towards the light pillar. At this moment, the Shi Bai corpse wizard king, who was the closest, had the greatest chance. But he had become the center of all the powerhouses' jealousy and hatred. Countless attacks were launched towards him. Even though the Shi Bai corpse wizard king had an extremely strong defense, bright colors formed into a huge craggy shield. The bright yellow light made it seem like a heaven-grade treasure. But 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. Moreover, there were more than 4 pairs of hands at this moment. All of them had gone crazy. Ah! An extremely angry roar resounded. The Shi Bai corpse wizard king was heavily injured. The crazy situation made all the powerhouses' hearts pound. Lin Feng's eyes were bright, but he also felt suffocated. He pursed his lips tightly and waited for the next moment to appear. Who would have the last laugh? Bang, bang, bang. Lin Feng's heart beat faster, his eyes suddenly cold. He turned his head reflexively and saw an extremely bright light, carrying with it the aura of a king. One after the other, two figures dashed out of the crowd. Fast, indescribably fast. Especially the light figure in front, it was already like a phantom. Finally, Lin Feng muttered to himself. Gu Xing and Qi had finally made their move. Chapter 1305. So smart. Lin Feng thought to himself. Gu Xing's grasp of the situation was above the rest of the strong fighters. No matter how fierce the fight was, and the Holy King-level fighters were just a hair's breadth away from the light pillar, Gu Xing could still hold himself back from attacking. Not everyone had such courage and patience. Now that he attacked, his aura was impressive, like a divine king descending from the heavens. However, all the strong fighters' attention was on the gap, on the broken light pillar barrier. Especially the surrounded corpse wizard King Shi Bai. His position was facing the gap, and he would be able to touch the light pillar if he took a step forward. The other parts of the light pillar barrier were also shattering, but the speed of shattering was not as fast as the gap. But the corpse wizard King Shi Bai's step was harder than ascending to the heavens. The bird that sticks out gets shot. How many Holy King-level fighters, with more than 10 terrifying attacks, no matter how strong the corpse wizard King Shi Bai was, he would not be able to fight against so many. In that instant, he was heavily injured. One step late, and we will lose the chance to fight. One step early, and we will be targeted by all the strong fighters. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled. Gu Xing's aura was too strong. Even the qi behind him was stronger than 2/3 of the Holy King-level fighters present. Against such a powerful duo, it would not be an easy task to bluff their way through. If the two of them had appeared earlier, they would have become a thorn in everyone's side. But now, just like the breakpoint between the spear moves, the moment when the attack and defense switch, just right. Qi. Water overflowed to the heavens. Gu Xing's forehead flashed with a luster, the faintly discernible white star source energy displayed a majestic power. Gu Xing's appearance caused the surrounding space to twist, the water origin energy surged like never before, and in terms of aura strength, he was undoubtedly the strongest presence present. 12 royal constellations, Aquarius. Lin Feng's eyes brightened. The star seal on his forehead was clear, and in his eyes, the rich space Dao and water Dao combined tightly and harmoniously. The two different Daos did not feel out of place at all. This was far better than Jin Ji, Shi Jixin, and the other strong fighters of the 12 royal constellations. Truly unleashing the power of the 12 royal constellations. The combination of Daos was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Arcana has been unleashed. Lin Feng muttered softly. His eyes flashed with light as he entered his own state. However, he could not see through Gu Xing's secret. Too strong. It was far beyond the scope of his strength. Cries of surprise could be heard all around. At this moment, as Gu Xing truly entered the battlefield, he finally attracted the attention of many experts. However, it was too late. Pa! A beam of green light, which contained the power of water, distorted the space, causing Gu Xing's figure to disappear in an instant. Just like that, he mysteriously disappeared before everyone's eyes. Lin Feng's heart shuddered, and he looked at the corpse wizard King Shi Bai. It was as if he had stepped through time. The green light came into contact with the corpse wizard King Shebi's heaven-ranked yellow-level natural treasure. However, his aura was far superior. Hiss! Lin Feng sucked in a breath of air. He was extremely shocked. Even though he could not see how the battle was going, judging from the aura and Gu Xing's character, his hesitant attack would definitely not miss. As an outsider, he clearly knew what Gu Xing's goal was. Rather than breaking the barrier that was about to shatter, he might as well pick up the one that was already there. The barrier where the corpse wizard King Shebi was at was already empty. Truly, a skilled person is bold, Lin Feng thought to himself. No matter who it was, if they wanted to enter this gap, they would have to bear the fury and attacks of all the holy king-level experts. This was the case for the corpse wizard King Shebi. Could Gu Xing be an exception? Boom! 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 A second wave of crazy attacks descended. The holy king-level experts on the battlefield had a tacit understanding. The power and range of their attacks were more than double that of the first wave. They clearly knew that the first person to enter this gap would be the first to come into contact with the light pillar. How could they compromise? Lin Feng was moved and pursed his lips. If he could sense it, these holy king-level experts would naturally be able to sense it too. No matter how fast and ingenious Gu Xing's actions were, they could only be used as a smokescreen. They could not fool everyone. The difficulty of entering the only gap in front of all the experts was not to be underestimated. Would he be able to withstand these attacks? Even though Gu Xing was one of the 7 ancient gods of the ancient tribe, he was still an ancient. He did not have the strong physique of the wizard tribe and was not good at close combat. This was because every expert of the ancient tribe was a heavenly god. The answer was revealed in an instant. Ah! A hysterical roar, filled with extreme anger. Faced with the second wave of attacks, Gu Xing's figure instantly disappeared as if space was distorted. The emerald green light enveloped the yellow light of the corpse wizard King Shebi, and the two of them strangely switched positions. It felt as if the corpse wizard King Shebi was being led by the nose. Bang! 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 Countless attacks landed on the corpse wizard King Shebi. Even though he had the defense of a heaven-level yellow-level treasure and a strong physical body, the power of these attacks was far beyond what he could handle. In an instant, the corpse wizard King Shebi's blood splattered everywhere as if he had gone mad. At this moment, he no longer had the pride and elegance of a wizard king. Rumble! Lightning exploded as the corpse wizard King Shebi unleashed the last of his strength and roared into the air. At this moment, he had already made the most reluctant decision: retreat. He was heavily injured. If he was injured again, even if it was not fatal, he would not be able to escape. Swish! Like an arrow piercing through the sky, the corpse wizard King Shebi's hateful gaze was like that of an evil spirit, filled with extreme resentment. But the winner takes all, and the outcome was unavoidable. In this fight for the heavenly treasure, luck, intelligence, experience, and even fate were all very important. Even if one had the geographical advantage, it did not mean everything. Powerful, Lin Feng praised inwardly. Gu Xing had used the corpse wizard King Shebi as a shield to deal with Yang Ling and Yang Ling. This kind of thinking was extremely ingenious, like a heavenly steed soaring across the sky. However, only he can do it, Lin Feng said softly. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Even if the corpse wizard King Shebi was heavily injured, no one on the battlefield was confident of defeating him one-on-one, let alone toying with him. Just a heaven-grade Huang-grade Xiantian treasure was already extraordinary. However, heaven-level green-level, Lin Feng pursed his lips. Gu Xing had a heaven-level innate treasure that was one level higher than the corpse wizard King Shebi. After leaving the human territory, he had truly seen the top fighters of the Dou-Ling world. A heaven-level innate treasure was a must. Battle power did not only depend on training to increase one's strength, but also on treasures. For Gu Xing, it should not be a problem for him to defeat a heavily injured wizard king. But to control him and play the same trick as just now, that emerald green innate treasure would definitely play a major role. The scene of Lam Tok Ti escaping that day appeared in his mind, and Lin Feng felt a chill. All he lacked was a true heaven-level innate treasure. Whoosh! penetrating the barrier. Outside the battlefield, everyone widened their eyes and held their breaths. Gu Xing's rise from behind had exceeded the expectations of every expert, but he had done it. Moreover, he had accomplished this unimaginable feat with the strength of a heavenly god. The small crack in the barrier had already lost its ability to attack. At this moment, the other experts on the battlefield no longer cared about sniping Gu Xing. In fact, it was useless to snipe him. Boom! Boom! Bang! 8 immortals crossed the sea, each showing their abilities. All the fighters used all their strength to attack the barrier in front of them. The barrier's energy in the light pillar had already been greatly depleted, especially now that a corner of the ice mountain had collapsed. All kinds of cracks spread out in waves, as if a city wall had collapsed. However, it's too late. Lin Feng's eyes flashed. In his eyes, at this instant, Gu Xing had already arrived before him, and she'd seized the initiative. The giant light pillar shone brightly, but as the barrier's energy dimmed, the light gradually disappeared, as if it had lost its magic. Rumble! A violent sound rang out, and the barrier finally collapsed. At this moment, Gu Xing's right hand finally touched. Whoosh! Light flashed. Lin Feng widened his eyes, and his heart seemed to be about to jump out of his chest. That was such an intimate call. It was so close. However, it was so close, yet so far. But the light flashed, as if a heavenly treasure was about to appear, and it enveloped all the fighters. However, the only one who came into contact with it was Gu Xing. There was no need to doubt Lin Feng's reaction. Gu Xing had triggered the heavenly treasure, just like how Jin Ji had triggered the red heaven-level treasure. This was a kind of recognition, a kind of inheritance, or rather they had found each other's connection points. It's his, Lin Feng thought. His heart was filled with complicated feelings, but he couldn't describe them. Although he really wanted the heavenly treasure, he didn't have the strength to fight for it. Gu Xing had the last laugh, and it wasn't unexpected. He definitely had the strength to do so. Even if he was surrounded by enemies and all the fighters were watching, he believed that Gu Xing definitely had the ability to break out of the encirclement. If he could really integrate with the heavenly treasure, his strength would increase to an unimaginable level. However, was it going to end like this? As Lin Feng pondered, he suddenly felt a piercing pain in his chest, and it instantly tightened. An extreme uneasiness filled his heart like a cold fog. That is? Lin Feng's expression changed drastically, and he looked at the distant sky. He couldn't feel anything, but there was a death-like aura that descended at this moment, and it made his hair stand on end, and a chill ran down his spine. That was the most direct feeling, and it was a kind of fear that came from the bottom of his heart. Bang! 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 Lin Feng pressed his chest, and his face was pale. He hadn't felt this for a long time. Danger! It was like a warning bell. An unprecedentedly strong enemy was about to descend. Chapter 1306. Black, a pitch-black color. It was a black that was thicker than ink, a black that seemed to devour everything. An extremely sharp and ferocious aura descended from the sky, bringing with it a domineering aura. The terrifying blade light seemed to want to split the world into two. It was an unstoppable attack, one of the most powerful forces in the world. Axe? Lin Feng's eyes widened. Looking at the sky and feeling the terrifying aura, his heart palpitated. It was too terrifying. Even though he was so far away, he could feel the murderous aura, the power that could destroy everything. He could imagine how much pressure Gu Xing, who was in the center of the attack, would have to endure. How terrifying the aura was! Outside the battlefield, it was suffocating. At this moment, the Sage King-level experts who were charging towards the Pillar of Light were all shocked. Someone had appeared out of nowhere. Furthermore, he was extremely powerful. Just looking at the axe, just one attack was already so shocking. The target was clear. It was Gu Xing, who had already come into contact with the pillar of light. The rising light proved that Gu Xing had already established a connection with the pillar of light. However, it was impossible to obtain it in such a short time, or even merge and control it. No matter how good the opportunity was, no matter how good the feeling was. Whoosh! Gu Xing's eyes flashed. He only needed 3 seconds and was confident that he could take the pillar of light for himself. However, it was not easy to hold on for 3 seconds. However, he had no choice but to try. Swoosh! Swoosh! The familiar emerald green light reappeared. The extreme spatial energy affected everything in the surroundings. As Gu Xing's special eyes shone, he fully unleashed the power of the space element heaven-grade treasure. Control element. Twisting space, extreme changes. Corpse Wizard King Shebi had suffered from this move just now. However, this time, no. Lin Feng was gloomy. His intuition told him that Gu Xing could not reverse this act. Clean, neat, and powerful. This axe strike seemed simple, but it was as effortless as falling down Mount Hua. However, it contained deep mysteries. It was as immovable as a mountain, and it looked clumsy. Most importantly, this axe was a perfect demonstration of the path of strength. There were no tricks. 1 against 10. Hua! The space warped. This axe seemed to have sunk into the clouds and mist. In an instant, the space warped as well. However, the power of the qi did not weaken in the slightest, and the pressure of the aura increased instead of decreasing. Gu Xing's expression changed, and he muttered softly. In an instant, another yellow light appeared. It was a resplendent orb that was flashing with a yellow light. It was shiny and translucent. A heaven-ranked, yellow-ranked Xiantian treasure. Lin Feng's eyes shone brightly. In a short period of time, Gu Xing had already used 2 types of heaven-ranked treasures. How shocking! However, the axe fell, completely ignoring the emerald green radiance, directly landing on the resplendent yellow ball. As it fell, the resplendent sphere actually changed shape and sunk in like a sponge. It was rather peculiar. The yellow light went from bright to dark, but it did not reach its darkest color. It was as if a string had been pulled to its limit. Finally, ping! Suddenly, a huge explosion occurred as the terrifying auras collided. Rumble! The black and yellow starlight intersected, and the dense energy exploded, forcing the Sage King-level experts closest to them to resist and stop the momentum. With their strength, they did not dare to be careless in close quarters, let alone Gu Xing, who was closest to them. No, he's not injured, Lin Feng muttered to himself. The explosion seemed to be extremely powerful, but Gu Xing had benefited from the heaven-ranked, yellow-ranked Xiantian treasure, and was able to resist the damage. However, although it seemed like they were evenly matched, Gu Xing was actually at a complete disadvantage. First, he used a heaven-ranked, green-ranked Xiantian treasure to weaken the attack of the Black Axe. Then, he used a heaven-ranked, yellow-ranked Xiantian treasure to resist the attack. Only then did they barely reach a draw. As for the other party, he's still not at his strongest. Lin Feng gritted his teeth. Although he was unwilling to admit it, this was the truth. That was just an axe that came from afar, and not the strongest attack that he had prepared for. Looking up at the sky, the owner of the huge axe had already appeared. He stood proudly between heaven and earth, and his cold eyes looked down on the world. Lin Feng was stunned. Looking at the person who came, his heart seemed to stop beating. He would never forget that face, and even more so, he would never forget that person. That person had saved his life that day. How can it be him? Lin Feng couldn't react in time, and his mind was in a daze. The person who came was the existence at the top of the pyramid in Battle Snake City, the boss of Glenoid Scale and Miao. Bull Demon! Rumble! Rumble! Raising the huge axe, the black light engulfed the world. Bull Demon's eyes didn't have the slightest bit of mercy. At this moment, his battle intent was boiling, and a terrifying attack condensed. Just based on this aura and power, one could imagine that it was definitely not something that the previous axe could compare to. This axe was the true manifestation of his strength. Chi. The huge axe fell with a black light. The second axe. It was probably the last axe. Gu Xing, do you accept it or not? It's too late. Lin Feng sighed inwardly. Perhaps if Gu Xing could block this axe, he would be able to obtain a heavenly treasure for his own use. However, the result might be death. Regardless of strength or aura, Gu Xing is suppressed by Senior Bull. Most importantly, Gu Xing is a heavenly god and doesn't specialize in close combat. He's completely different from Senior Bull. Lin Feng's heart was clear. Gu Xing's strength was already inferior. If he wanted to use his weakness against the enemy's strength, he would undoubtedly be asking for trouble. Would Gu Xing let go? The answer was already very obvious. Many times, even if he didn't want to let go, reality would force him to do so. Pursing his lips, Gu Xing's face was no longer calm and composed. His eyes were filled with annoyance and coldness, and he was obviously extremely angry. He was very clear that if he let go now and wanted to obtain this heavenly treasure, it would undoubtedly be harder than ascending to the heavens. However, he couldn't risk his life. He had to dodge. Gu Xing's figure suddenly flashed, and a faint white star source energy condensed in his hand. The brilliance of the water screen and the spatial energy combined to form a heavenly screen. The waves condensed and intertwined with the space, distorting and violent. Gu Xing was extremely angry. He wanted to counterattack. Even if he couldn't obtain the heavenly treasure, he definitely wouldn't let his opponent get it. A fierce battle. The two of them launched an intense attack. Gu Xing, give up, Lin Feng said softly. At this moment, Gu Xing was fighting as he walked, and he was already far away from the light pillar. Bull Demon was also stubborn, and he was dragged away by Gu Xing. The departure of the two powerful experts was out of everyone's expectations. At this moment, all the Sage King experts were boiling, and they rushed towards the light pillar. When the Sandpiper and the Clam fought, the fisherman would benefit. Who would have thought that the outcome would be like this? Only Zhao didn't do anything, and his expression was extremely solemn. Similarly, on the other side, an extremely ghostly and sinister sorcerer tribe expert also stood still. It seemed that he had discovered something. Come, there's more than one. Lin Feng's eyes were burning. He pressed his hand to his chest, and his expression was extremely solemn. The aura that made him feel fear and dread was not Bull Demon. In an instant, a golden light illuminated the sky, and the original darkness was completely expelled. A terrifying and suffocating power enveloped everything, and thunder rumbled in the sky. Golden aura. The shocking and terrifying power had completely merged with the golden aura, and it was indestructible. Compared to Bull Demon's pure power, the strength seemed to be inferior, but the Tao contained in it was slightly more. No, it's two. Lin Feng's eyes shone. Other than the Tao of metal and the Tao of strength, there was also a weak Tao of space mixed in. Although the Tao of space was very weak, and it was not as perfect as the Tao of metal and the Tao of strength, the combination of three Taos was far superior to the combination of two Taos. The power of heaven and earth was activated, and thunder rumbled, and a huge golden rod fell from the sky. Boom! It was terrifying enough to destroy heaven and earth. A Sage King expert was charging at the front, and his eyes were shining. In the next moment, he would be able to touch the light pillar and gain the upper hand. However, in the next second, a suffocating power completely enveloped him, as if a heavenly tribulation had descended. The golden light carried a terrifying power, and when the rod fell, the entire heaven and earth became quiet. Bang! The power of the rod was terrifying. The shocking astral source energy destroyed everything, and the rod's power was fully displayed. The surrounding people were abnormally suffocated, and Lin Feng looked up at the void, his eyes sparkling. It was a red-yellow elite ape holding a huge golden rod, wearing a sparkling battle suit, and surging powerful muscles accompanied by a pair of fiery red eyes, captivating people's souls. Its entire body was emitting a terrifying power, and its surging battle intent looked down on the heroes. It was like an emperor looking down on the little ones. Monster race. Lin Feng's heart trembled. A terrifying aura, terrifying power, and a domineering aura that ignored everything. Who was he? Kill one as an example to 100. As the Sage King expert's soul was scattered by the rod, the other Sage King experts were stunned. Deeply shocked. The red-yellow elite ape's demonic eyes flashed, and he stood in the sky without hesitation. Hua! Its figure flashed, and it landed beside the light pillar, and its hairy right hand grabbed the light pillar without hesitation. In an instant, the light pillar flashed brightly, as if it was violently resisting, and was extremely repelling. Roar! The beast roared, and the golden astral source energy exploded. The red-yellow elite ape became stronger when facing a strong opponent, and it roared like a tamed wild horse, releasing its power, and its tyrannical strength completely suppressed the light pillar. The surroundings were silent and everyone was stunned. No one dared to take a step forward and stop the red-yellow elite ape's actions. The light pillar's light gradually dimmed, and the red-yellow elite ape's eyes became brighter and brighter. Its innate divine strength completely suppressed the light pillar. Lin Feng's face was solemn, and a chill ran down his spine. His heart felt that the red-yellow elite ape's pressure was too strong. It was as if it was directly suppressing him. Who was he? This question was no longer important at the moment, and the important thing was, Hua. The light pillar rapidly shrank, flashing a faint light, and turned into a huge rod, flashing with an ancient color, and fell into the red-yellow elite ape's hands. The ownership of the heavenly treasure was determined. Chapter 1307. At this moment, Lin Feng had also finished adjusting his breathing. His doppelganger's body was indeed extremely strong. Even though he had been heavily injured, he had recovered in a short period of time, condensing an intense light of star source strength. Although the body of the seven souls fused into one was only at the Saint Realm, it was comparable to a Saint King Realm Master. His star source power had also completely recovered. To do a good job, one must first sharpen one's tools. Entering this unfathomable formation was already extremely dangerous in itself. If his strength was reduced by another level, wouldn't he be asking for trouble? Huff! Lin Feng exhaled lightly and opened his eyes. His eyes shone brightly as he looked in front of him. Even though time had passed, the formation was still operating steadily without any flaws. The leakage of strange energy condensed into a natural barrier around him. Anyone who entered would be trapped in a Saint King-level illusion. He had suffered a lot before. The strength of a formation is related to the mysteries of the formation. However, the power of the formation also plays an important role. Without the support of a strong formation, no matter how profound the formation is, it is just a finely designed paper box. It can be broken with strength. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. He had memorized the foundation of the formation. Everything that Shun had taught him was circling in his mind. Every one of them was important. Any formation, no matter how complicated it was derived from the most basic element. The power of the formation was like the cells of the body, indispensable. This formation was created out of thin air. It was not born. Lin Feng thought. So, the biggest possibility is that it is like the blood weep secret realm. There is something strong supporting it as the formation core. As long as I can find the formation core, the formation will break by itself. There were many types of formations. It wasn't rare to see a grand formation that used the heart of the formation as the main body. For example, as long as the general of an army was found, even if the formation was not broken, the formation would break by itself. He did not want to find out the secret of this formation. It had nothing to do with him. His only goal was to find Jinji, to save him from the formation. I hope everything goes well. Lin Feng moved lightly. Then, as the huge stone wall moved and changed its shape in an instant, whoosh! He entered. Squeeze. Suffocation. The illusion before his eyes reappeared, and it was even more profound. As expected, Lin Feng's eyes flashed, and his heart was as firm as ever. His surroundings were dyed blood-red, and the mournful cries of countless vengeful spirits sounded out in his ears. Countless terrifying ghosts bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they pounced at him. This feeling was exactly the same as when he was in the illusory fog outside. It was not unexpected. This was the ability of the strange energy. There was an illusory fog outside, and the power of the formation here was dense, so it was bound to exist. Moreover, it was even better than the outside world. The horrifying scene and the suffocating smell of blood were no different from reality. In fact, the attacks of these malicious ghosts would leave deep scars on one's body if they were not careful. The only difference was that other than the illusory realm, there was an additional layer of formation, an additional layer of obstruction and danger. He had already mentally prepared himself for the sudden appearance of this strange formation, and knew that it would be extremely dangerous. I have to be quick, Lin Feng said to himself. Whether it was breaking the formation or finding the core of the formation, he had to be fast. Otherwise, forget about finding Jinji. He was afraid that he would also be consigned to eternal damnation if he fell into it. Chi. Lin Feng held the amethyst spear in his hand, constantly changing his position. The encounter in the fog outside had given him a certain method to deal with these illusions. Dodge, he had to dodge. Block, he had to block. It was impossible to dodge perfectly. At the very least, he couldn't do it with his strength. The best way was to reduce the injuries as much as possible. I definitely can't float in the air, Lin Feng thought to himself. Previously, he had suffered a lot. Not only did he lack flexibility in the air, but he also attracted more attacks from the illusions from all directions, which were many times more than those on the ground. Fortunately, this formation is more of an illusion. Lin Feng nodded secretly. If the formation itself had an attack, it would be even more terrifying. And now, all he had to face were the illusions of leveling up and maze. Who? In front of him, there was a stone wall. He kept moving at an extremely fast speed. He could not see the surroundings clearly, and he had no sense of direction. The stone walls moved and collided with each other at high speed, producing clanging sounds that reverberated like thunder. There was no pattern to it at all, as if it was constantly changing its position. It's overlapping. Lin Feng's eyes flashed. These collisions were not real, but reflected in a mirror-like way. Outside the formation, he had vaguely seen these stone walls move. Under the influence of the formation's power, the changes of this great formation were actually not complicated. Just like the outermost stone walls, they all moved in the same direction. In terms of the formation's mechanism, it was much simpler than the bewildering bamboo formation. Shun once mentioned that this overlapping method of breaking. Lin Feng's expression was calm. Even though there were many illusions, he was very confident. As Shun said, more than 80% of formations were usually two extremes. Either they focused on the formation's own mysteries, weakening the formation's core and formation's power, or they used some kind of supernatural existence and powerful energy as the core to form the entire formation. There was only one. Just like how it was difficult for an Empyrean god to be both a heavenly spirit master and a heavenly soul master. It was the same for formations. Shio, Shio, Shio. His body was like an arrow, and his figure was like an illusion. Facing the endless attacks of the illusions, Lin Feng's expression was solemn, and his eyes shone brightly. There was a saying in formations: wherever there were more illusions and more powerful, it would be closer to the formation's core. The logic was simple. However, it was a key secret of formations. Now, the purple crystal spear in Lin Feng's hand flashed. The golden light carried with it the rumbling of thunder, and it directly smashed into the stone walls in front of him, producing a rumbling sound. The great formation trembled violently. Lin Feng's lips curled up slightly. He faced the huge stone wall in front of him and did not hesitate to crash into it. His previous attacks had not only broken through the overlapping, but also found out where the mirror was. Like a ghost, his body penetrated the stone wall and went deep inside. In the Magus realm. Despicable brat! Shibai's blood flowed like water as he panted heavily. No matter how strong his body was, how strong his recovery ability was, and how protected he was by a heaven-ranked innate treasure, Shibai's current situation was quite tragic. Only he knew how serious his injuries were. He could barely resist the first attack, but the second time, he was used as a target by Gu Xing. There was only one word to describe it: tragic. It was extremely tragic, and he was seriously injured. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given up on this rare treasure that was hard to come by in 1,000,000 years and run away without a care for his reputation. He was a Magus king. Below the Magus Emperor, the 12 Magus kings were on equal footing. Fleeing in such a sorry state would make him lose face in the future. He would definitely become the laughing stock of the other Magus kings. However, he knew clearly that if he did not leave, only death would await him. Compared to reputation and treasures, his life was more important. Huff! Huff! Shibai's breathing was like an ox as he gritted his teeth. His speed was not as fast as before. The aura of the battlefield was too dense, and the space was not stable. He could not return to his tribe. At this moment, he was already some distance away from the battlefield. Shibai's face was pale. He took out an astral pill to treat his injuries and lit up the ring on his right hand. The light was dazzling. As one of the Magus kings, how could Shibai's corpse not have any treasures? A heaven-ranked yellow-grade innate treasure was only one of them. Inheriting the Magus king bloodline, Shibai's corpse could be said to be very rich. In fact, every Magus king had an endless supply of treasures. The Magus race was the richest race in the Douling world. Just you wait, ancient brat! Shibai's corpse gritted his teeth and lit up the black ring on his hand. The light was so dazzling that it illuminated the sky. Shibai's corpse closed his eyes and waited for the energy to activate. He would be able to return to his tribe soon and heal his injuries in peace. However, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, time passed slowly, but he could not feel any spatial energy. Shibai's corpse opened his eyes in confusion. He pressed his hand on his heavily injured body, extremely puzzled. It was clearly normal, but why could he not activate the power of the innate treasure? Suddenly, Shibai's corpse raised his head. In the void, there was a tall man with a naked upper body. He looked extremely demonic, and his eyes were filled with cold light. He was looking down at Shibai's corpse with a sneer, as if he was looking at a joke. He could not feel any aura at all. It was not that this man was too strong, but he was too heavily injured. Demon! Shibai's corpse's face turned cold, and his anger surged. At this moment, he finally understood why the innate treasure did not work. It was most likely the doing of this demon. The spatial energy was completely suppressed. Hello. Shibai's corpse greeted him with a smile. The demon's smile looked more like mockery. He slowly descended as if there was no one around. His demonic aura was faintly discernible. Although he was in human form, he could not hide his demonic aura. He was the Magus race's greatest enemy. The demon clanman obviously had no intention of hiding his identity. He sneered, and the aura he exuded caused his true form to appear behind him. It was a ferocious tiger with blood-red eyes, descending like a demon. The blood tiger race, Kuiken. No, it should be the demon, Kue too. Despicable demon. Shibai's corpse gritted his teeth, almost squeezing out the words from between his teeth. Shibai's corpse was filled with resentment and anger. He knew clearly that he was in big trouble today. His opponent had obviously been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. If he was not injured, he would not be afraid of this demon. But now, his strength was less than 10%. Ta! Ta! Kue too approached with a faint smile on his face. Shibai's corpse's breathing quickened, and his chest heaved up and down. He suddenly shouted and turned around to escape. However, a red light flashed in front of him, and his face turned pale. Two forces appeared one after another, sandwiching him in the middle. The extreme spatial energy changed, sealing off all exit. A heaven-ranked red innate treasure. The person who came was dressed in a black cloak, and his eyes were sinister. Lamb Talk Tea. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.